hell of a game over the weekend for the Missouri Tigers, despite them falling short 34-30 to South Carolina. That fourth quarter, I didn't expect that, T-Bone. I mean, at halftime, I was thinking, all right, this game's over. Brady Cook doesn't look good. South Carolina's all over the place. This game's over. And then, as Mizzou fans have seen this season, it's typically the second half, typically the fourth quarter, that Mizzou decides to mount that comeback. And they did so in a highlight reel fashion. Unfortunately for them, though, they couldn't get the stop to where South Carolina drives down the field and essentially wins that football game. And what that does is it cues the Boys to Mend end of the road song for the Missouri Tigers.
I'd pretend to be sad, but
know,
as an Illini fan.
You got a smirk on your face. With Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. No BK today. He'll be back with us tomorrow as we are with you until 2 o'clock this afternoon. Our Air Comfort Service text line 314-399-9646. You can also check us out over on YouTube at 101 ESPN STL. Our studio cams brought to you by the Air Alliance team. So now the Missouri Tigers fall to 7-3 on the season, and that was a do or die if you wanted the college football playoff scenario still alive. Now, the other things happened for Mizzou around them over the weekend in college football that could have kept them alive, but it came down to them beating South Carolina, which was a daunting task on the road, T-Bone. They fall short, and that essentially ends the college football hopes for this Missouri Tigers team. Where we all came into the season, the expectation was Mizzou to be a college football playoff team. Now, I know BK gets angry about this, because, well, now they don't even have the chance to be a 10-win team anymore, so that's kind of out the door.
I don't know how angry he can really be now.
Now it's just, it is what it is. But with the expectation of being a playoff team with the expanded postseason in college football, now that it's fallen short, what does that do for our view of the Missouri Tigers? Because for me, it's a disappointing season. You had last year, Eli Drinkwitz. You said all the right things and you backed it up and had very impressive wins, even impressive losses to teams like LSU and Georgia. There was really nothing impressive about it. Your three losses were ugly losses, and the wins, they weren't that sexy either, including a couple of overtime victories, a Drew Pine going off for 3 minutes. It's been an underwhelming season for the Missouri Tigers, and now you potentially wrap it up with, 8 wins on the season?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely possible they finish with 8 wins. They should win their next 2 games and get themselves to 9. But, yeah, I'm with you, man. I think it's a disappointing season for the Missouri Tigers. Look, I know BK would say, well, there's 9 wins is nothing to laugh at. I mean, sure, 9 wins is impressive, but when the expectation, when you returned that offense from a season ago with Brady Cook, you brought in Nate Noel, who's been a solid running back for the Missouri Tigers, and you had your top wide receivers, Theo Weiss and Luther Burden coming back, expectations were playoff or bust for the Missouri Tigers, and they're not going to make it. And to your point on them against top 25 teams, look, Boston College was ranked when they play them. You now look at Boston College in their season, and the quarterback that started against Missouri has left the program because he got benched for somebody else, and they are currently sitting, if I'm not mistaken here, 5-5. So it's not even an impressive win anymore. You know, Vandy pushed you, and that one's looking better now because Vandy's a pretty good football team in the SEC. But the teams that were like top 25 and we said was an easy schedule, really you needed to win just one of these 3 games probably to keep your name in the conversation for the playoff. Get blown out on the road at A&M, got blown out at Alabama. That one's a little more understandable because Brady Cook did get hurt in that one. And then you lose to South Carolina in a game that you really had no business in being in. Don't get me wrong. It was impressive that they were able to come back in that game. But then your defense doesn't tackle at the end of the game. Like that play we just played coming back in the return here. That quarterback ran through like 4 Missouri Tigers on his way to the end zone. Yeah. It was just abysmal what happened with their tackling in that game against South Carolina. To me, the season's officially a disappointment. And I feel bad for Missouri Tigers fans for how much just hype was around this program coming into the year. But Drinkwitz and the guys just didn't live up to it. Yep. And I'm sorry, 9 wins, if they get to that point and they get to a pretty nice bowl game like the Pop-Tart Bowl, which just announced 3 mascots today, by the way.
There's 3 mascots for the Pop-Tart? Let me guess. Strawberry, s'mores, and Oreo Pop-Tarts.
I don't think that's right, but I don't remember. I just remember it was 3 because I was amazed that there was 3 mascots for that stupid thing. To me, the 9-win season this year with the expectations and the schedule that was laid out for them, it's a disappointment.
Yeah.
You know, I think some 9-win seasons for programs, like if Illinois gets there, for example, is a success. And I'm not saying that because I am an Illini fan. I'm saying that because my expectation was, fingers crossed, I hope to get a bowl game this season.
Yeah.
You know, it's different when you go into the year as a top 25 team with an easy schedule in the SEC, which is a gauntlet itself, as we've seen this year. And you only get to 9 wins and you end up probably missing the college football playoff. That's disappointing in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, like, to put it into context, if you finish this year with 9 wins, where you've wrapped it up with Mississippi State and then Arkansas, 1 on the road, 1 at home. So the expectation, of course, is 9. But, I mean, we've seen a couple of competitive outings by either of those teams, so it could change the outcome. I think the reason it's so underwhelming for me is because you were an 11-2 team last year, and you were 1 possession away from being 12-1, and I mean a Georgia game where in the first half you looked like a pretty darn good team, and then the second half you just kind of fell apart. And maybe the expectations were set too high because of that 11-2 win, because it was a massive jump going from 6-7 to 11-2. But it was underwhelming because your offense never lived up to the expectation.
That's the other thing. Yeah.
I mean, like, again, I came into the season and I was looking at their defense thinking this was going to be the problem. And then you start back-to-back games with shutouts against non-con opponents. I understand that, but still, shutouts aren't just easy in college football. Hence, Mizzou not being, or Illinois. No, it was Kansas that wasn't able to shut out Lindenwood. So, like,
yeah.
Sorry, I went through Mizzou, who were a bad team, Illinois a bad team, and then, yeah, we got to Lindenwood. Anyway.
Kansas sucks.
Hey, don't tell that to BYU.
True.
Defense was a surprise for me this season. I think they're top 10 in terms of just points allowed overall in college football this season. The offense, I just set it and forget it. I said, okay, well, Brady Cook's coming back. He's already built the chemistry with this offense. Sure, you lose a wide receiver, but you've got another year of Theo Weiss. You upgrade your running back game when you lost Cody Schrader from this past year. Offense, I just set it and forget it. And I'm looking at this right now. Like, you've scored 30 points 3 times this season as a Missouri Tigers team. Like, that felt like it was a certainty for Mizzou. So I think that's where it really feels like it dipped off for me, because there was so much excitement of Eli Drinkowitz coming after 11-2 season where you win 6-2 in the conference. And that was following a 6-7 season to where it's like, Drink, you got to do something. And then you did it. And then to have that much of a dip back, that's the disappointing factor for me.
Yeah, and I think your point on the offense is 100% accurate, because you're right. Coming into the year, what was the excitement around Mizzou? It wasn't about the defense, because the defense was a huge unknown coming off of a year where they lost a ton of pieces. It was with the offense. It's not very often you're going to get your top quarterback back. You're going to end up with your 2 best wide receivers returning to the team. And by the way, you brought in a bunch of running backs that you were excited about, Nate Noel and Marcus Carroll. Carroll hasn't ended up being the guy that I think they expected, but we started raising alarm bells about that offense in the Buffalo game?
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, probably the Murray State game, just because it wasn't explosive. And I think it was through like the first 4 weeks they were as explosive as Army. Now, in their defense, Army's a good football team, but that's pretty alarming when that's a triple option that the explosiveness was the same as them. So, for whatever reason, things didn't end up clicking for Missouri offensively this season. And you're right, it's one of the biggest reasons why they are a disappointment in this season, because you didn't do anything at A&M. And look, you can say that Alabama game, Oklahoma, Auburn, those 3 are kind of in that stretch where Brady Cook's dealing with the injuries. He comes back in the Auburn game, leads an incredible comeback. He gets hurt at Auburn, doesn't play at Oklahoma. Look, the game that needs to be circled is A&M.
Yep.
To me, that's the one where it was, okay, this is probably where the season you're going to look back on and go, what happened? Because it was a no-show. It was a no-show in your biggest game of the season at that point. And then you lost one of your mulligans, and then you had to win essentially at Alabama and at South Carolina. And I know you can say, well, you didn't have Brady Cook for most of that game. Yeah, well, if you don't use your mulligan at Texas A&M, you can afford a loss there. But you burned it. You go 0-3 against the top 25 teams on your schedule. Leads to a disappointing season for the Missouri Tigers.
See, the one that I circled was the Vanderbilt game. And I know it was a win, but you had to go to double overtime to beat Vanderbilt. And Vanderbilt at the time playing some good football, I understand. But that offense never showed up. And by then, you're talking 5-6 games into the season. That was the one that you're circling. You're like, uh-oh. And then, of course, the next game is the Texas A&M where things really fall flat. So then you go beyond this season. You wrap up with 9 wins. You get to a Pop-Tart Bowl like T-Bone mentioned. And look, overall, as a college football fan, I would take that over missing a bowl game every single year. I hated the 6-7 Drinkwitz just like I hated the below 500 Barry Odom years. So I'll take it. But now with an expanded college football playoff bracket where you've got 12 teams and who knows what it looks like in the future, unfortunately for Eli Drinkwitz, the expectation is not going to be anymore, well, you just need to get to double-digit wins. With the postseason expanded, the expectation is going to be set as being a college football playoff team, or at least flirting with it. And by flirting with it, I don't mean sitting here with 3 games left in their season going, well, we need 17 different things to happen for us to get there. The expectation is to always be one of those teams that's on the bubble of an SEC team. Whether you like it or not, that's what's taken place for Mizzou because you had an 11-win season and a season that people viewed you as a college football team or a college football playoff team. The next couple of years, those are going to be the lofty expectations on Drink once again.
See, you know what's funny is I don't think expectations moving forward should be every year Drinkwitz is in the playoff conversation because I don't think Missouri's that program. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Drink is the guy that ends up turning the program into, I don't know, the SEC's version of, like, I would say Nebraska, just because I don't remember Nebraska in their heyday. But I don't think that it's fair to say every year, year in, year out now, moving forward, Drinkwood should have expectations of, hey, this should be a college football playoff contender, you know? Because I look at Missouri, they're not Alabama, they're not Georgia, they're not some of the Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon. They're not the blue blood program. I think what you're going to see is you're going to get these kind of years where expectations will come in, where it's probably, once every 3-4 years. For the most part, though, like I still think expectations is going to be like 7 to 8 wins typically for Eli Drinkwitz. And in some seasons, again, that won't be disappointing. But I don't think that the expectation, like going into next year, depending on what he does in the offseason, should be, hey, that should be a playoff team. I just don't think that is something that is going to be feasible for the Missouri Tigers to have as expectations for the long run as a program.
It's tough because, like, you look at their just recruits for 2025, you've got 1 5-star, 8 4-stars. They're ranked 18th right now in just the recruiting rankings around college football. Like, that's where I feel like I put the expectations. Mizzou has found ways to add on to their excitement because of Drink's ability to recruit and bring in these 4 and 5-star talent players. It's seemingly tied to a quarterback because it was Brady Cook and then, like, okay, well, who's next? And so now you got to figure that out. But overall, he's done a great job recruiting, but you got to back it up on the field. And that's one thing that this Mizzou team has not found a way to back up. So we'll get more into college football because even though Mizzou season is dead, RIP, end of the road, we'll maybe sing that later. Probably not. There are a lot more scenarios that have opened up in college football rankings, so we'll get into those a little bit later on. We're also going to get into a little Cardinals conversation, plenty of Blues talk, including what we're going to get to next. Because, yes, the Blues go 1-1-1 on their road trip. Yes, they fell 4-1 to the Carolina Hurricanes last night. But there was something optimistic for this Blues team that came from that game yesterday. We'll discuss that on BK and Ferrario next here on 101 ESPN.
gets cleared out. Picked up, shot, and scored. Natchez is having a night. A goal and 2 assists. Oh, they score right off the draw. A quick face-off win. Shot goes in, and with 3:13 to go, it's 4-1. Natchez again. Ofer leads the Blues off the ice. The horn sounds. And Carolina beats the Blues by a score of 4-1. A 500 road trip for the St. Louis Blues.
Remember the offseason where they were like, oh, Carolina's not sure if they want to pay Martin Natchez. Not sure if they want to bring the guy back. He's frustrated. They're frustrated. What's going to happen? The guy was almost traded this offseason.
Yeah, now he looks like Superman.
And now he is third in points in the National Hockey League behind Nathan McKinnon and Kirill Kaprizov. What is happening these days with Tanner Hendrickson?
Got him, Army.
Yeah, well, him on top of Broberg and Holloway. What an offseason that would have been.
Instead of this Texier cat.
Grant Francis, Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Alex Ferrario. Look, the Blues lose to the Carolina Hurricanes. They go 1-1-1 on that road trip. As Bill Parcells once said, you are what your schedule or your record says you are. It's a 500 team. And you saw it in that Carolina Hurricanes game. I don't want to dwell too much on that loss to Carolina, the win versus Boston, the overtime loss to Buffalo. That's what this team is for now. But the more optimistic point that came from that broadcast yesterday was, and this is why you got to listen to the pregame skate, ladies and gentlemen, which is brought to you by First Community Credit Union, because we always have the good nuggets. This was Joe Vitale when he and I got on the air together yesterday.
You know, I do not have a crystal ball. Is it realistic for him to be available at some point on this homestand? I think it's definitely available. I think it's possible. Will I think it happen? I don't know 100%, but I do think, you know, to me, around that San Jose game on Thursday the 21st at home, that's the last game of their little homestand. I think that has some potential, and I definitely think that sometime on that New York trip, we could possibly be seeing 18 back in the lineup a little bit sooner than we were hoping for.
A little bit sooner? That's like on the dot. Tuesday would be 4 weeks since he was injured against the Winnipeg Jets. And remember, it was reevaluated in 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Thomas started skating prior to that road trip. Thomas started skating probably around like the 10th or 11th of November by himself, and then got on the ice. Remember, it was after that Washington Capitals game with the team, skated a few more, and then went on that road trip with the Blues. Since Robert Thomas went out, the Blues went 4-7-1. You picked up 9 out of a possible 24 points. That's not great, but if you're going off a point percentage, you were 1 or 2 points away from being just a 500 team when Robert Thomas was done. I don't know what this season is going to unfold, but that's exactly what you needed to do until you could start to get healthy. Now, Broberg's not skating. Letty's not skating, at least from our understanding with the team, and that means they're still a ways away. Those are 2 critical pieces for your team to get healthy. But defensively, this team has mightily struggled. I think almost averaging about 4 goals allowed per game more from when Robert Thomas was injured to where they're at right now. If you get Robert Thomas back, and let's say on the cautious side off of just Joe. And again, this isn't reporting. It's just Joe kind of discussing, speculating. But Joe's on that road trip. He's tuned in with the team. If you get him back by the San Jose Sharks game or the New York Islanders game, you did exactly what you needed to do to keep your team at least in the conversation, and then you got to jump back in when you're healthy and start capitalizing. So Robert Thomas coming back for this team fixes your defense. It gives you more depth on the offensive side, and overall, I think it at least gives you an opportunity and a leeway to figure things out faster than where you're at right now.
Yeah, I think with Thomas coming back potentially here in the next week, did the Blues do enough to stay in the race? Yeah, they were okay. I think they were, 4-7-1, if I'm not mistaken.
I'll flip that statement and say the Western Conference did enough to keep the Blues in the race.
That's exactly what I was going to say is, did the Blues do enough? Kind of. What really happened was the West said, hey, you guys can stay in this because we're not going to run away just yet.
Yeah.
The Blues were fine. 4-7-1, if that's what you told me the record is, and let's just say they lose tomorrow.
Yeah.
So let's say they go 4-8-1 or 4-7-2. That would be kind of what my expectation was without Robert Thomas, and Philip Broberg added on top of that. Mm-hmm. So that doesn't really surprise me. What's surprising is that the Western Conference has allowed the Blues to still kind of be in this thing. Look, I still don't believe that this team is very good. I said it Friday while we were at Centene. they need to embrace this read tool. They need to really focus in on playing the guys that need to be looking for player development, and I still believe that because even with Thomas back in the lineup, I still don't think this team's very good offensively. They weren't all that much better when he was in the lineup. Where they really are worse is defensively, to your point. They are a much better defensive team when he is out there on the ice, and that you have really seen in his absence since he's gone out. So did they do enough while he was out of the lineup? Sure. I'll give them credit because they aren't technically out of this thing. I still don't know how much this is really going to help them. It's going to be a huge boost to have an actual centerman in your top six finally, which will be nice to have him. It's going to help them on the faceoff dot where they've really struggled in his absence. But is it going to lead to better team results? That I'm still skeptical of if I'm the St. Louis Blues.
One thing I will say is that you can talk about the record, but when you look at the losses without, your two best players at the beginning of the season, which was Robert Thomas and Philip Broberg, there's only 3 of those games that I felt bad about their effort and the way they looked just in general. It was the Washington and Ottawa game, the 2 8-1 games, and then probably that Montreal game that they lost 5-2. That was another one that didn't look great. But you look at the other games, they had good efforts in pretty much every one of the other games. You talk about the eye test, I thought they looked fine in most of those games. You look at the Philly game, a game that they should have gotten a point out of. It was the turnover that ended up in the back of your net towards the end of regulation.
Glad we didn't say names.
Same story with Utah. Again, I won't mention names.
Yeah, not names. Same name, but not names.
But, I mean, you look at the Buffalo game. They played fine. They got a point.
Which is wild because of what we just stated for the unnamed player in 2 games. But the Buffalo game, everyone was pissed off that the unnamed player wasn't playing. I digress. Go on, Grant.
I still think he should have played.
My overall point being, yeah, the record isn't great without Robert Thomas, but if you're considering the eye test and you look at how they've played in those games, it hasn't been as bad as maybe the record says it is.
Yeah, so and that's kind of what I want to hone in on because, of course, the pushback right now from Alex being an optimistic with Robert Thomas coming back shouldn't surprise anybody.
It's a cloudy day. He should be really negative.
No, man. I like the sunshine. It'll come out sooner or later, but probably not. You go to the Utah Jazz game. The Utah Jazz game. Oh, my God.
They don't have a name. You can call them whatever you want.
Jackson was standing peripheral to me. That's why NBA came up. The Utah Hockey Club game. You lose that game off of a turnover, and in a turnover that I don't know if he's on the ice if you have Robert Thomas. The the Boston Bruins game. You give up 3 goals in the final 10 minutes of that third period. Robert Thomas on the ice probably negates one of those because of how he's been defensively. If you don't believe me, go look at JR's piece on The Athletic without Robert Thomas. The heat map in terms of puck possession by the opposite team in the blue zone is just wild compared to when Robert Thomas is there. Buffalo Sabres game. In that scenario, Oscar Sundqvist is not on the ice. Robert Thomas is on the ice. I just gave you 3 games that I don't know what happens when you get to overtime, but at least you get to overtime. And those are 3 points with Robert Thomas on the ice. And you really want to know why Alex is optimistic, the homer. This text that we just got. Capitalizing, they can't even get a player back, and they're still less than 500. Your fandom, Ferrario, is a disgrace to real conversation.
Wow.
Okay, you want a real conversation?
Tough crowd.
Real tough crowd. I expected that today. You want a real conversation? Sorry. Can we discuss a real conversation better? Okay. Regardless. Go look at the schedule beyond December 31st. And I know you got to get there first, and there's a lot of games that you could just suck in. But if Thomas comes back by San Jose, you at least improve in certain areas. And we can't disregard the improvement that we saw defensively when Robert Thomas and Philip Broberg were healthy for this team. But the reason I go to December 31st is the expectation is Broberg and Thomas could be back by that point. The schedule for the Blues really allows them to put themselves in the conversation again. From January 1st until the end of the regular season, they play 43 games. 9 of those 43 games are played against the Eastern Conference. So that means, quick math by Ferrario, which is always a dangerous thing, 34, I'll get there. 34 of their 43 games, not quick math, in the final half of the season are played against the Western Conference. Now, I don't know what you look like because against the Western Conference, you haven't been really good this season, but you've only had 2 games against the West where you've been fully healthy. If your health is on your side beyond December 31st, meaning Thomas and Broberg are back, then you have a real chance to put 4-point swings in your back pocket against the Western Conference. And for this Blues team, it's hard to deny that when healthy, they don't have an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, does the schedule play in their favor? Yeah, if I look at it on paper, it does. And like to your point about the Blues and their defense in this stretch, when they had Robert Thomas, they were early on. Again, it was only 7 games, so I think this is a small sample size. But I do think they were better with him clearly based on the numbers in the eye test. 2.86 goals allowed per game for the Blues in that 7-game stretch in which they had him. Since he's been out, 3.75 goals allowed per game, second worst in the NHL. The only team worse is the Montreal Canadiens. So, yes, I do think they are going to improve defensively, and they are going to be in a lot more games like what you were talking about with that Boston Bruins game. I don't think you're going to see those 3-goal spurts that we've seen where they allow. Or maybe you end up cutting out some of those slow starts that we've talked about, which has been a big issue. Granted, they had that problem when he was in the first 7
I was going to say, they fixed that now. They've scored 4 straight games.
The schedule does open up a little bit, but I still, and this is where we differ, and we've differed on it all season long. I still just don't think they've got the guys there to really uplift them, to go on a run. I think this team, at best case, when they are healthy, when they have Thomas, when they have Broberg, is going to sit around 500. I always thought they were about an 81 to 86 point team, and I still believe that. Even with those guys coming back potentially, I think you're going to just see them continue to tread water. I just don't know if they've got the guys to take them over the top and really take advantage of the schedule that is easier for them, because if they did, I think you would see them be able to go on a 4 or 5 game winning streak. But guys, we haven't seen them play a complete 60 minutes of hockey, even dating back to when Robert Thomas and Philip Broberg were on the ice. At best case scenario, we've seen the Blues play 40 minutes typically is what you get. Every night there's always one period where you look at it and go, what the hell was that? I just don't see this team being able to put this together. And though the schedule does open up a little bit for them, and it's early, but they have the 12th easiest schedule remaining in the NHL, I just can't see a scenario in which they're going to take advantage of that.
I just still struggle to be so hard on this team when you put the situation that this team has been dealt to any other team in the NHL, and this is probably the exact same results. Like, look at the Colorado Avalanche right now. The Blues and the Avalanche are almost the same team at this point in the season. Avalanche are 9-9. They've played 1 game less than the Blues, but they've got only 1 more point than the Blues. Meanwhile, they have Nathan MacKinnon, Cale Makar, Mikko Rantanen. They do have injuries, but they're a little bit of their lesser players in the lineup. Imagine you take Nathan MacKinnon and Cale Makar off of that team, which is essentially what you would be doing, taking off Thomas and Broberg, your 2 best players on the defensive and offensive side for the Blues.
Real quick, people that are like, you just compared Thomas and Broberg to Makar. He's not, but if you look at the points, like Broberg was a point-per-game player. Thomas did not have a good start to the season. But in the sense of who you're putting on the ice,
I'm saying you take away, just general speaking, your number 1 player
2
on
of your
the
best
forward,
players.
number 1 player on defense. Where's that team at? Colorado has those 2 players, and they're still in the same spot as the Blues right now.
To be fair, though, Colorado is dealing with so many injuries that they've got scrubs they picked up off the street to come in and play some hockey games.
But aren't the Blues?
No. The Blues...
Corey Schooneman is playing in their defense right now.
Defensively, they are there. But let's not...
Sorry, Corey.
To me, the Blues...
Yeah, no offense.
Yeah, we didn't have to say names again, Grant.
We weren't doing names, Grant.
That's why we were avoiding them. I don't think the Blues are in that spot, right? Because, sure, theirs is on the defensive side of things, and Colorado's is more on the forward spot. Colorado still has better depth. Colorado's still a team that's put together better when they are healthy. The Blues, like the guys that we're talking about that are injured. Nick Leddy, we've been trying to trade for the last 3 years. You look
still
at Torrey
a top 4 defenseman, though, and you have been...
For the Blues.
But you have been skating with Scott Perunovich and Matt Kessel in your top 4 for the last couple of games.
What I'm trying to get at is the defensemen that are out. Broberg's an exception. Broberg, I'm 100% in on. He was their best defenseman. There's no doubting that. Torrey Krug, a guy that we were saying should probably be playing on your 3rd pair if he was healthy this season.
Yeah, but I don't think we're talking about those guys. We're talking Thomas and Broberg.
But what he's bringing up is, he brought up Colorado, and if they lost Makar and they lost McKinnon, if they just lost those 2 guys, yes, they would struggle. They are positioned better, though. If it was just those 2 guys, and they are dealing with significant injuries now.
Ooh, I don't know if I agree with that.
The guys they are losing, though, to me, are not on the same conversation as a Leddy, as a Krug, as a Joseph, a P.O. Joseph. to me, those aren't the same conversation. I think the guys Colorado's loss is better than what you've seen from the Blues and what they've lost.
And see, I would push back with that too, because like if I look at the games that they've lost, and I'm going off of the month of November because that's really when you've seen both the loss of Broberg and Thomas. I look at Utah, Boston, Buffalo, and Carolina. Those 4 games, I don't know what the outcome is because T-Bone's right. Like, they did not look like a fully equipped team from start to finish, even with Thomas and Broberg in the game. But you go certain scenarios with those games. Late against Utah, Thomas is on the ice. And Thomas, albeit if we think he wasn't performing offensively, is a very good defensive forward. He's a underrated, Selke conversation. Maybe you limit the amount of opportunities that Utah has there. Same can be said about Boston. Same can be said about Buffalo. Those are 3 games right there that you get to overtime and who knows what happens. Again, this is such a hard thing to do on the sports take side because it's not like a hot take. This team would be a playoff contender with those guys in the lineup. I just look at this team as if you're going to view them as, well, this is a season that's over. They're going for a top pick. This season is a dud. I don't know if I would write them off yet just because you've had health on the opposite side. You've been banged up all season. And I'm not making an excuse for that. It is an explanation. If you get those guys back, can your team find their well-rounded game by the time you get to January when the schedule allows you to really pick up pace against everyone else?
And my answer, sorry to cut you off, Grant.
Very good.
My answer of can they find their well-rounded game is no, because they don't have a well-rounded game. They are a retooling team. Now, they need to embrace that a little bit more, in my opinion. And I think they are always going to tread around 500. And that is what I just see in this team. I don't see the offense. I didn't see it when they had Thomas. And they were, 7 games, small sample size. They were 4-3 in that stretch. That's a 500 team. And I just don't see where they have this well-rounded game. I don't see this epiphany coming for the St. Louis Blues. That's where I am skeptical of what the St. Louis Blues, if they can really turn this around. Again, this is why I'm saying they should still be embracing this retool, even though Robert Thomas is getting ready to come back.
I think the one area I'd push back, and you're not wrong, 4-3 being just that 500 team, but you look at those 3 games that they lost in those first 7 games when they were healthy. The Vegas game, the Minnesota game, the Winnipeg game. Minnesota game, they outplayed Minnesota heavily. They just didn't get the bounces, and Minnesota capitalized on their chances.
You lost off of a shorthanded goal.
100%. Winnipeg.
I know. The power play, man. That's what we really should be talking about.
Winnipeg was on a heater, and you took them right to the very end. That was a heck of a game, too. And then Vegas, another one of those teams where you took them right to the end, and those 3 teams are 3 of the best in the NHL to start the season. So, yeah, they were 500 to start the season-ish, but every game, even the ones you lost, it looked good. Like you looked fine.
And I know we got to go to a break, but to that point right there, why am I saying they can't find a well-rounded game? Because they can't play 60 minutes.
Yeah.
And
that's a fair criticism.
You can say they were in those games, and I'm 100% with you. You know what? It's about wins and losses. Yeah. Did you come away with the 2 points or not? And the answer, when in the small sample size when Thomas was healthy, the answer was still no.
Yeah. Again, we won't know if Thomas is coming back. Again, this is all based off of Joey V talking about it on pregame yesterday, that there could be a chance Thomas could return against the Sharks or potentially on this New York road trip over the weekend and next week. But for right now, the Blues don't skate today. Before you even talk about Robert Thomas coming back, you got to see him on a skate with the team where there's contact. And then from there, you can build off of when he could return. Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up at 15, we'll have questions and answers. You send us questions. We will get to them on our Air Comfort Service text line, 314-399-9646. But coming up next, makes sense BK took the day off after the Chiefs' embarrassing loss to the Bills yesterday. What does that do in the AFC? We'll discuss next on 101 ESPN.
Greg Francis here with a SportsCenter update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Blues over the weekend picked up a win on Saturday in Boston. That won 3-2 in overtime, but last night fell 4-1 in Carolina. Blues now 8-10-1 on the season, 17 points, 3 points out of that final wild card spot as of now in the Western Conference. Blues will be back in action tomorrow as they welcome in the Minnesota Wild here on home ice. That pregame will be at 6 o'clock, puck drop at 7 here on your home for the Blues 101 ESPN. And then for Mizzou, despite a heck of a second half effort, they fell 34-30 to South Carolina, now 7-3 on the season. I'm Greg Francis. The SportsCenter update's been driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Takes left, now taken off. Gonna run for it, he got it! And there he goes! Inside the 10, the 5. Oh, the play of the year in the NFL!
That call courtesy of the CBS broadcast yesterday where Josh Allen, the game-winning rush touchdown to put Buffalo on top. Now, there still was about 90 seconds left to go, and I looked at Grant because we were in the middle of pregame at the time, and I said, this isn't over. And then, of course, they got the interception off of Pat Mahomes. That offense really never clicked for Kansas City yesterday against the Bills. And as we all would do here on BK and Ferrario, even if Brandon Kiley was in studio, it's time to knight the best team in the AFC, the Buffalo Bills. They hand the Chiefs the first loss of the season. They pick up their 9th. They beat everybody's favorite in the AFC, the Kansas City Chiefs, right? We're all in agreement. Buffalo's a better team.
Josh has kind of done this before.
Okay,
We'll say better regular season.
And ding, ding, ding. Welcome to my assumption. So many people were like, this was the moment. Buffalo's going to run with it now. You could go down the hall to 105.7 The Point and ask the biggest Bills fan I know, Donnie Fandango, and he will tell you the exact same thing that we're about to say. Let's pump the brakes.
Well, considering he thought they were going to lose last time I talked to him before that game.
Donnie thought Buffalo was going to lose a lot this season. But here's where I was impressed. That was the type of game that the Buffalo Bills instill the confidence that we can compete with this team. Look, they've done this 4 straight seasons to where they've beaten the Kansas City Chiefs. So it's hard to sit here and be like, Bills are going to get to the Super Bowl this year. They've overcome their demon in the Kansas City Chiefs. I'll wait to talk about that in the postseason. But for the regular season, I do believe the Buffalo Bills just cemented themselves as the best all-around team in the AFC. I mean, their offense is significantly better than what Kansas City's offense has done this season, specifically in their last 3 games. Mahomes just has not been clicking with that offense. Defensively, I think they've allowed the 5th fewest points in the AFC. They are a well-rounded team right now. Their running game is dangerous, their defense is dangerous, and when healthy, their passing game is dangerous. But I'm not going to sit here and knight the Buffalo Bills as the team that's finally going to take down the Kansas City Chiefs. That designation can be taken care of in the postseason. But for right now, you should be celebrating Buffalo because they are the better team.
Yeah, I still don't think that they're going to be the team that, I'm still going to view the Chiefs as the favorite in the AFC, even though they did just lose to the Buffalo Bills. But to your point on Buffalo, they feel like the team that is the one that can do it. Mm-hmm. And not just because we just saw it, but you saw that their defense was able to slow down Mahomes' that offense. And I'm with you 100%. I don't think Mahomes has looked great this season. He's been good, but he's 15 touchdowns to 11 interceptions so far this year. So he hasn't been like he typically has been early on in the season. And when you look at Josh Allen, he was fantastic in that game. And he's played like that before against the Chiefs. Go back to the game where they blew the lead with whatever it was, 13 or 12 seconds left to go in the fourth quarter. But I'm always going to look at the Chiefs kind of like I looked at Brady and the Patriots or Brady and the Buccaneers. You know what? Until you actually beat them in the playoffs, I'm sorry, but they're the favorites because I'm not going to go against the quarterback that, though I'm saying he's playing poor this year, He's got better weapons than he did a year ago, and I know that Mahomes is going to take his game to the next level by the time you get to the playoffs. So, hey, congrats to the Bills. You hand the Chiefs their first loss. They're still the team to beat in the AFC. Though Bills, though, probably put themselves ahead of everybody else in the AFC as, hey, we're probably the number one team that's going to have a shot to take down Kansas City in the playoffs.
They're better than Baltimore. You can talk about Baltimore's offense all you want, but they're better than Baltimore because defensively they have the ability to get stops and Baltimore doesn't. I saw that against Pittsburgh yesterday, even though Pittsburgh literally just scored field goals, but still found a way to win that football game. They've got a quarterback who knows what it takes to get it done against Pat Mahomes. And that's where it feels like they're dangerous. And what I mean by that is, like, we always talk about Bengals who they figured out how to make Patrick Mahomes bleed. And that's why everybody looks at Cincinnati and says, well, they obviously could do it because they did it in the postseason. And Buffalo has not yet beaten them. But that just felt like one of those games that in any situation, Josh Allen is going to find a way to win the football game. And I don't know if I can say that about past years because, yes, he's looked great in the regular season, but he's also made tons of mistakes. He's had 5 interceptions this season, and I think all 5 of them have come in the last 4 weeks. Like, he has perfected his game in the sense to where he's not as much of a liability. Now, postseason is a different animal, but if I see it in the regular season, it puts more optimism on my side to look at Kansas City and say they haven't figured things out on the offensive side yet.
For the Bills, I don't know if you feel this way, they just feel more balanced.
They do.
Right? Josh Allen taking care of the football, not forcing it into tight spots like it feels like he did in the last couple of years. You know, I've always said Josh Allen's the quarterback that can win you the football game, but is also the guy that can lose you the football game because he sometimes tries to fit too many balls into that tight space, especially when he's trying to get it to Diggs. But I think this year that's changed a little bit. Yeah. I don't feel that way as much. I feel like he is taking care of the football. Even though he did have the 1 interception yesterday, he's taking care of the ball. He's using his legs when he has to, which you know he's going to really utilize when you get to the playoffs. And James Cook, though yesterday was not a great game for James Cook, just 9 carries for 20 yards. The Chiefs are a tough team to run against. James Cook's been really good this season. And now you've got Amari Cooper, who made one incredible catch down the sideline one-handed. Curtis Samuel looked good. Shakir looked good yesterday in that game. Like, they feel more balanced, and to your point,
and they were still without their 2 leading touchdown receivers in Coleman and Kincaid.
Exactly. And they're only going to get healthier. So they feel more balanced this year offensively. And defensively, to your point, like, defensively, they're a lot better than the Baltimore Ravens.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why, to me, they are the team that is probably, not only do they have a pretty good defense, but they've also got that balance on offense. Like, we always talk about the Steelers. The Steelers have a great defense. There's no denying that. Their offense put up 18 against Baltimore, who's not very good defensively. They don't have the offense to compete with a team like the Kansas City Chiefs. And I loved what Sean McDermott did yesterday, that rushing touchdown that we played. Look, BK has talked about this a lot before. When teams go up against the Chiefs, and I think it was Todd Bowles that did this on Monday night, if I'm not mistaken, he had a scenario where I can't remember what it exactly was, but he decides not to go for it on 4th down. Yeah. I think they settled for a field goal or something like that, and they end up losing the football game. It's 4th and 2. For Buffalo. They can kick the field goal. They can go up by, go up by 5 if they want to. Man, I loved in that scenario when you're looking at it as the Buffalo Bills in Sean McDermott and you say, you know what? We're going to win or lose this with our quarterback. I loved that mindset from the Buffalo Bills. That's the kind of aggressive nature you're going to need from a head coach when you get to the playoffs. If you're going to beat the Kansas City Chiefs, you've got to have that kind of mindset of we're just going to take it to them. Don't care if it's 4th and 2. You know, we're not going to give Mahomes the ball back and it be a 1-score game.
Totally. He's Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis. I'm Alex Ferrario. Mike Sando asked a question on The Athletic that I want to get to on the other side, and we'll get to your questions. Our Air Comfort Service text line, 314-399-9646. Our YouTube chat, The Graveyard, up on our YouTube page at 101 ESPN STL. Questions and answers next on 101 ESPN. 714-399-9646, our Air Comfort Service text line. You can also send us over on the YouTube chat, The Graveyard at 101 ESPN STL, our studio cams, brought to you by the Air Alliance team with Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis. I'm Alex Ferrario. We'll get to your questions real quick, but I wanted to bring this one up. T-Bone brought it to my attention. Mike Sando over on The Athletic put this over the weekend. Quote, I'm picking Josh Allen if we have a draft now to start a franchise. That was a quote from an NFL executive that texted Mike Sando after the Bills' victory. I will open it up to the court, gentlemen.
Can I be honest? I'd still take Patrick Mahomes.
I don't know if it's that significant of a difference, though.
I agree with that. I think it's a lot closer than it's ever been, but I would still lead with Patrick Mahomes because, look, man, I just said in the last segment, I'm not going to take anybody ahead of the Kansas City Chiefs until I see them get beaten in the playoffs. And why is that? It's not because of the organization as a whole. It's not because of Andy Reid. It's not because of Steve Spagnuolo. It's because they got Patrick freaking Mahomes, who's been incredible. And he does, though I don't think he's played as well this season as he did last year, I still think, man, he's been incredible. Completing passes at almost a 70% clip. He's still the guy I'm starting a franchise with.
Yeah, unless you want to be the Nashville Predators and raise banners for regular season champions, then I would say Patrick Mahomes would be the player I'd
you
start
don't want to
with.
be the Nashville Predators?
No. Especially right now, I
think
don't.
anybody wants to be. I'm with you guys. Like, Patrick Mahomes won a Super Bowl with Mecole freaking Hardman. Like, that is a conversation that we just had. And Josh Allen has had Stephon Diggs for how many years and could not get there. But I don't believe it's Patrick Mahomes' gap and then Josh Allen. I would say, to me, it's a tied for first. I would seriously consider Josh Allen as well, because what Josh Allen can do other than throwing the football, I don't believe Patrick Mahomes can do. Now, sometimes that results in fumbling the football. Sometimes that results in turning the ball over, and Patrick Mahomes doesn't do that a whole lot. But if I need a first down to win a football game, and I got a guy who not only can throw it for a first down, which we saw him do last night multiple times on third and fourth down, but also can pick up 20 yards with his legs, it's not going to be an easy of a decision as it would be where it's like, oh, it's Mahomes, obviously.
Yeah, and I think that's 100% fair, because just watching him in that game over the weekend against the Chiefs, I don't know how you ever game plan to stop him, man. Because he can beat you when he throws in the pocket. He's now getting, in my opinion, smarter and not taking as many risks when he is throwing the football. And to your point, like, it's when Mahomes, if he has a 20-yard run, there was a major coverage bust.
Yeah.
Like, let's just be honest.
Yeah.
Mahomes isn't going to have the quarterback sweep to the right and go gain 20 yards. Allen can, man. Like that 4th and 2 play where he scored that touchdown, that's designed. Where he's going to take it, to your point, he runs like a running back. I don't know how you game plan for him. I still would take Mahomes, but if you told me, hey, Mahomes is off the board, who's the second guy you're taking to start your franchise with? I'm with you. Josh Allen is the clear-cut answer for me.
All right, a couple of these on the Air Comfort Service text line from the 636. Guys, if the Blues continue to stumble, who besides Saad could be traded? Well, Foxa. I think teams would be calling about Matthew Joseph.
I don't know if demand would be out there, but I think if I'm a team that needs to, like an Edmonton Oilers, if you're in a playoff hunt.
No, they can't have Broberg or Holloway.
No, I'm saying Ryan Suter.
Oh, yeah.
I would trade Ryan Suter Suter in a heartbeat if I'm trying to contend for the playoffs. I need a defenseman.
Absolutely. I do think people would call about Justin Falk. I think he's having a really good season. If Letty comes back and is healthy, I think teams would call about that one. But Brandon Saad's going to be the number one priority. He and Fox will be the number 1 and number 2 priorities for a lot of teams. But I like that one. Ryan Suter, you're not getting much, but a team would call and say, hey, we need a Ryan Suter to win this cup.
Yeah, Suter's definitely one that I think that's a good call. I think there would be teams that be interested in him, especially because now he's playing on your top pair, and though he looks like he's slowing down a bit, he's still been pretty good for the St. Louis Blues. It's a shame. This is going to sound weird to say. It's a shame for the Letty injury, because coming off of the season that Letty had last year, look, I know he struggled in the first couple games that he was here at the Blues. I thought if Letty had another season like that, he would be somebody that could get you something at the trade deadline as well.
From the 618, guys, is there any risk of Robert Thomas suffering a similar fate to Torrey Krug if he comes back too soon? I don't believe so, because this was, at least from my understanding, this is a minor break for Robert Thomas. This wasn't like a fractured ankle to where he needed surgery to be repaired. That's what Jaden Schwartz had dealt with. And, I mean, even look at Jaden Schwartz. He returned and has been good since. Like, Torrey Krug, it wasn't just one break that kind of put him in that pre-arthritis situation. It was one break, and then it was playing on it continuously to where it hadn't fully healed. So I don't believe that's the case, and I got to imagine the Blues are going to take every precaution possible that if, like, he's coming back too soon, they'll pump the brakes on it.
Do you remember what Torrey Krug's original injury was? Was it a break?
I think it was a fractured left ankle in the playoffs, but
Okay.
I thought he injured his going into the boards, not blocking a shot, but I couldn't be wrong.
Yeah, I think you're right. It went where he had fallen down.
Because the optimistic side for Robert Thomas right now is that, a lot of people will say that a fracture is better than like a sprain.
Well, and here's the thing also. That happened in the playoffs the previous year, and then he came back, but he didn't play until later on in the season. So, like, this was something that kept him down. Again, remember Jaden Schwartz, where it was like a complete break on his ankle. He was out for, I thought it was 6 to 8 weeks, if I'm not mistaken, maybe longer than that. And this was a 4 to 6 week thing with Robert Thomas. So I'm not concerned about that. And even if you are, I mean, look, Torrey Krug tried to play through it, and Torrey Krug did play through it. He played another 6 seasons to where, like, this guy didn't really have much nagging him until he turned 32, 33 years old. So I wouldn't be too concerned about that one. From the 618, T-Bone, is Notre Dame the most dangerous team heading into the college football playoffs?
Notre Dame?
You want to take this one, Grant?
No. They said T-Bone.
Sorry.
Grant, take it.
Grant, I loved Grant's response because I'm with Grant. I saw this text coming in and I was like, Notre Dame? What? No, I think the most dangerous team going into the playoff, if you're talking about a team that can get hot and probably go on a run, that you're looking at going, okay, who is that team? I can't believe I'm saying it, but I think it might be Georgia or Alabama. One of those two for me. Because Georgia, that was the first complete game we saw for them all weekend, right? They just said, you know what, we're going to run the hell out of the football. We're going to beat the snot out of Tennessee with the running game. Defensively, they were sound, but that could be because you're going up against the freshman quarterback. Alabama's still the team for me because Jalen Milroe can do some special things. I don't view Notre Dame as, and granted, they've played really good football of late. I mean, they did lose to Northern Illinois, which is odd, but they haven't played anybody that you really look at in their last couple. Navy, it looks like Navy's not as good as we thought they were. Georgia Tech, not very good. Stanford, not very good. Virginia, not very good. And they blew all those teams out. So they did what they were supposed to do. I still don't trust them when they go up against someone if you get to the college football playoff.
Yeah, they are consistently one of the most overrated teams in college football. They'll get beat in the first round.
I need to clip off that, Grant. Notre Dame?
I didn't know if I heard it right because I was like, really?
Nope, you heard it right. I didn't know if I read it right, but I did. Final one here. Guys, if Philip Broberg gets an extension this offseason, what do you think the terms of that look like? Man, that's tough. Like, Cale McCarr is making $9 million. I don't imagine he's going to surpass $9 million. Like, if you're going to lock somebody up like this, 24 years old next season, my guess is you go like a 6x8, something like that. You try and lock him up until he's about 30. But I really don't know. You could go 8 years with him if you think he's the guy, because that 8 years would take him till he's 32 years old.
I wonder, with the overpay that was, that happened with the offer sheets,
that if he'd be willing to take a little bit less because he got a lot of money early.
If that's the negotiation, because it's like you already made more than you were supposed to. We're going to get you at a little bit less now.
I don't know
if that's how it works.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, he's making more than he's supposed to. He was only going to get $1 million from Edmonton.
Sure, but it's not like he's not lived up already in his small sample size to that.
And I don't know if I'd want to do that negotiation and piss off a guy because, I mean, he's your number one.
If I'm him, I would ask for just a small bridge deal. And the reason I say that is because the cap's supposed to explode here in the next couple of years.
Do another 2 years.
Yeah, do like a 2-3 year deal at like, I don't know, $6-7 million.
Because then you're 26, 27 at the end of it, and then you get locked up until you're 35, 36. That'd be the way to go.
By the time the cap does rise, and according to Elliot Freeman, it could get into like $100 million, get into the mid to upper 90s.
Yeah.
Now a top pair defenseman isn't making, what'd you say, McCarr's making $9?
Nine. And his was a bridge deal too, because his was like 3 years before he gets paid a little bit more.
A top pair defenseman at that point could be making like 11, 12 million bucks. If I'm Broberg, I would be looking for a bridge deal.
Here's where I would tell people to keep an eye on. Keandre Miller with the New York Rangers. He's an RFA. He's going to be 25 years old. He's making $3.8 million right now. He's playing like a number one or at least top pair defenseman for the New York Rangers. he might be setting the market for what a defenseman is going to get paid.
You know what, though? He hasn't been good this season
He
so
hasn't.
far.
But if you're him, you demand the most money because you're
For
an
sure.
RFA. And if not, somebody... And then Evan Bouchard has also been trashed this season so far. He's the other one I'd say keep an eye on.
I will say, if I'm the Blues, I would hammer a $6 million per year contract for like 6 or 7
If he'd
years.
be
for
willing to
Broberg
take
right
that,
now.
I would do it in a heartbeat. But he's not eligible. He's not eligible until this offseason. It's 1 year left on his deal. So the offseason is when you hear those conversations. Speaking of Blues defensemen, Colton Parayko is having another impressive season. But T-Bone brought up an idea of rather than viewing him one way, if you shift to another while this Blues team is building. He'll explain next on 101 ESPN.
He's going to get it in. Parayko getting the final 30 seconds of this power play. They get it to him. He scores! Parayko bombs another one in. And the Blues have made it 3-1. 7:26 to
can take my victory lap anytime we talk about Colton Parayko because I just got harassed by our text line, which, by the way, Air Comfort Service text line 314-399-9646. You can also, on our YouTube channel, The Graveyard, at 101 ESPN STL over on YouTube. I was harassed by saying Colton Parayko is still considered a top pair defenseman. No, he's not. His plus-minus stinks. He's on the ice. He's got no points. Colton Parayko this year in 19 games, plus-minus ain't pretty. -6.
I knew it.
But where are all the trolls that are plus-minus doesn't matter unless it falls into my narrative? He's got 11 points in 19 games, 4 goals and 7 assists. Now, this might have shifted from last night when I was writing these numbers down. But as of last night, Colton Parayko amongst all defensemen ranked 12th in average time on ice. Now, mind you, that's in every scenario. Power play, penalty kill, even strength. He ranked 12th among defensemen. If you isolate it to even strength time on ice per game, Colton Parayko is ranked 2nd in the National Hockey League. He's tied for 3rd in goals, and he's tied for 9th in assists on the year. Colton Parayko is contributing offensively while playing about 26 minutes a night. Like almost half of the game, Colton Parayko is on the ice. Every facet of what the Blues have been doing, Colton Parayko is proving to be a top pair defenseman, a shutdown guy for this team, while also providing the offense. And that sparked a little rabbit hole by T-Bone that he was curious about.
Yeah, you know, when I saw those numbers that you tweeted out over the weekend, it just made me think, and I'm not necessarily saying I'm taking this side, but it just made me think, and I thought it was an interesting question. You know, we've always talked about when you're looking for somebody to pair with Parayko, when we had the conversations of Jacob Chikrin, Travis Sanheim, now you got the guy in the system, and Philip Broberg, and we've talked about him being up with Parayko at some point in the future, or maybe even this season when he gets back and is healthy. We've always said you got to find that offensive defenseman with him, right? Parayko's the stay-at-home guy, plays in that Bouwmeester role, but you need to find someone that can get up in the rush and play offense with him. But then when I saw these numbers, and we've talked about it in the past about Parayko, hey, is this a year where he's going to break out offensively? You know, maybe he ends up with more than the 26 points he had a season ago. Maybe gets back into double digits in goals for the 4th time in his career. Made me think, should the Blues be viewing Parayko more as the offensive-minded defenseman and look for someone that is more of a stay-at-home guy when they are looking to pair him up with somebody moving forward? And maybe that is Broberg. Maybe you tell Broberg to become more of that defensive-minded guy. But I just find that to be an interesting conversation is, do you now kind of change your perspective on Parayko of, okay, he's playing some really good hockey, though the plus-minus doesn't really show it. Granted, it's really going to be influenced by the 2 big blowout games. It makes me wonder if you're looking at this saying, okay, do we change our tone of how we view Colton Parayko? Should we look at him as a more offensive-minded defenseman and find someone that is more of a stay-at-home guy to pair with him for the long run when we get out of this retool?
I don't touch Colton Parayko and what I'm doing, and what I mean by that is he's a two-way defenseman for me. So, no, I don't isolate him as, hey, you become our shutdown defenseman, you play in the defensive zone, and we've got Philip Broberg who can play in the offensive zone. In my eyes, Colton Parayko can do everything. Colton Parayko, he's a unicorn in the sense, and Grant brought this up, how he skates. What'd you say, Grant? He was in the 90th percentile in every category?
So I was going to bring this up to you guys, looking at the NHL Edge stats. In skating speed, he's in the 93rd percentile. Speed burst, so accelerating, 99th percentile. Skating distance, 96th percentile. He's got a lot of different offensive statistics and speed statistics that have him in the top 5% of the NHL.
Colton Parayko is never going to be a points guy on the power play. Go look at Drew Doughty's numbers. We all agree Drew Doughty is considered a number 1 top pair shutdown defenseman, right? But he's also a guy that's viewed as an offensive-minded defenseman. I mean, the guy plays almost 26 minutes a night. Over the last 3 seasons, Colton Parayko has 3 more points than Drew Doughty at even strength. And he's playing 21 minutes a night on average over the last 3 seasons. This year, it's marked up to like 24 minutes a night because he's playing so much more. You've got a guy who not only is good in his defensive end, I won't say fantastic because, look, he's got some deficiencies. There's plays behind him that fall off, and sometimes there's mistakes that take place. But he is so good at getting the puck out of his own end that I don't change his mindset into a Jay Bouwmeester in the sense of, hey, you're our shutdown guy, and we'll get somebody else who can play offense. If anything, I find another two-way defenseman who can play with Colton Parayko. Like, I look at Philip Broberg as another guy who's a two-way defenseman. Offensively, we know he's gifted, but defensively, we've seen already 18, 19 minutes a night. He's not a liability on your own end. I think that's a duo that can play so much, kind of what the Blues were envisioning when they brought in Jay Bouwmeester with Alex Pietrangelo. Because remember, at the time that they traded for Bouwmeester, I think it was 2013, Bouwmeester was brought in to be the left-handed defenseman to play with Petro. Petro was that offensive guy, and they needed somebody who could just stabilize it as being a two-way defenseman. I view that as a lot of what Parayko and Broberg can be moving forward. Not meaning like, oh, you only use him 18, 19 minutes a night and just on the defensive end, and then you got somebody else who could play more. No, I view Broberg and Parayko as that 1-2 punch that you want out there in almost every scenario, because Parayko can do it on both ends of the ice. And if you find another guy who can do that, I mean, you're in what Vegas is in right now with Pietrangelo and Shea Theodore. You've got two guys that can do everything.
Yeah, and like when I was thinking of this the other night, when I was just kind of brainstorming of when we were going to talk about this, I would still lean towards viewing Parayko as a stay-at-home defenseman. Because though he can be a guy that can get up to 30 points, 35 is what his high is. Mm-hmm. You know, he's never going to put up the Doughty type numbers because he's not that good on the power play.
He's just not on the power play.
But I still think that says something. You know, Doughty's a 50 to 60 point guy. Parayko, though he gets about he'll probably get most likely 25 to 30. He'll be where he'll typically probably fall in a season. I would rather just view him more as a stay-at-home, but view him as a two-way guy, to your point, but lean towards, okay, he's more the defensive guy. Now let's find someone that is, to your point, two-way with him, but has more offensive upside like Broberg. And that's why I think it's the perfect pairing for those two guys moving forward. You know, I don't know if I want to say, hey, Parayko, go out there. You go be that guy that jumps up in the rush all the time. I think there are times for him to be doing that, and I think he's picked his spots perfectly so far this season. But I think for the most part, I'm still going to view him, when you're building this thing out for the Blues, as a more quote-unquote stay-at-home defenseman, and you'll still look for that guy that is going to be with him that has some offensive upside like a Philip Broberg.
See, I think that you have to look at Parayko as a true two-way defenseman in the sense that his skating ability gives him the opportunity to have that more offensive side. We've seen him pinch. We've seen him get down behind the net. We saw him in front of the net. Which game was that he scored a goal right in front of the net?
I don't know if he scored, but he didn't get the goal because the goalie saved it. But I think it was the Winnipeg Jets game, if I'm not mistaken.
It was one game where I thought he scored from right in front of the net. Either way, we've seen him get down low in the offensive zone. And a lot of times, if something does happen, he has the speed to get back. So I don't know if stay at home is something that he has to be. I think for Parayko, he's got to keep doing what he's doing.
Yeah.
Like he's totally fine in the role that he's in right now. You also don't want to back him off too much from the defensive side of the puck, because it's not a fluke that, I mean, you've heard Connor McDavid say that he hates playing against Colton Parayko. Mm-hmm. Why? Because A, his stick range, and B, his ability to close gaps with his speed. Like, he can not match the speed of Connor McDavid, but he can get right there with Connor McDavid and slow him down. You don't want to lose that defensively. So I don't think you want to pigeonhole him into a stay-at-home defenseman, but I also don't think you want to pigeonhole him into an offensive defenseman. I think the best of both worlds is to let him play that two-way style at 5-on-5. And then Curbs has been saying this for years. I'd love to see him get more of a role on the power play.
Yeah, that'll never happen.
I know it won't, but I'd love to see it.
I would too. I mean, that highlight that you just played against the Toronto Maple Leafs,
was a power play goal.
That was a power play goal with there was a second that finished, and then he stepped out of the box, so it should have been considered a power play goal. So here's the thing with him. The last 4 years, Colton Parayko is what T-Bone's talking about, a defensive-minded defenseman. He's starting 63% of his starts of play in the defensive zone. But if you go back and look at his first 5 years in the NHL, now this is when the Blues were completing for Stanley Cups. This was, of course, the Stanley Cup season. He was a 50-50 defenseman. 47% of the time he was starting in the offensive zone, 52% of the time he was starting in the defensive zone. I think the lack of personnel on the defensive side has pushed the Blues into this position to where they have to start him in their own end. Because look at who they've got around them. You've got Torrey Krug, you've got Justin Falk, you've got Nico Mikkel. You've got all these guys that are offensive defensemen. So you only have Parayko who can shut down the plays. But when the Blues were at their best, they had 4 guys that they trusted in both the offensive and defensive zone, and that was Alex Pietrangelo with whomever he was playing with. Sometimes it was Bouwmeester, sometimes it was Dunn, sometimes it was Gunnarsson, and then you had Bouwmeester, Parayko that you threw out there because you trusted both of them. That's what they need to build towards, finding guys in the top 4 that you trust in all scenarios. Right now, I don't think you have it. I think the starts in the zone tell you a lot about how they feel about Justin Falk versus Colton Parayko. You've got the building blocks of it, though, with Broberg. If you've got a Broberg, if you've got a Parayko, now you're trying to find the other lefty and righty that can start in both areas, because when you find that, now you're talking about getting back to the two-way defenseman. They just haven't had the opportunity with personnel to use that in the past few years.
I truly think that Colton Parayko is a unicorn type of defenseman. Like, what's the comp for him? Like, is there a player that has everything that Parayko has?
He's Drew Doughty in terms of how much he plays on the ice and the points percentage of what he's doing.
But Drew Doughty doesn't have the speed and the size.
I don't know if there's a defenseman that has the skating ability and the size of Colton Parayko. And now that's going to sound like such a homer take. And here comes the tone, but watch the game. How many defensemen do you see at 6'6" take the puck in his own end and just skate through the neutral zone and exit out of it? And guys are chasing him. And then when he's trying to do a wraparound around the goal, he's coming back the other way and making the play defensively. Again, you've got to get the points. That's what people only care about on the defensive side, or your plus minus has to be through the roof. But Colton Parayko is a guy that's playing 25 minutes a night right now, up there in the top 5 in the NHL in terms of even strength time on ice, and the points are starting to back it up. With Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. When we come back, we'll get to some other games around the NFL from over the weekend, including, could we please be done with this AFC team now? That's next on 101 ESPN. right, real quick, just to carry over the conversation, because we brought up, like who's the comp to Colton Parayko. A texter, by the way, on our Air Comfort Service text line brought this one up from the 618, and they said Travis Sanheim. And Grant looked it up. Skating-wise, yeah, it's Travis Sanheim. What is he, in the 88th percentile, you said?
Yeah, 88th percentile top skating speed, 98th percentile speed burst.
Now I know why Doug Armstrong was trying to trade for Travis Sanheim. We need another one of those guys, which, by the way, Broberg is that guy. Would you say he was, Grant, 98th percentile?
He was, let me get that back up here.
Sorry, throwing curveballs, ladies and
We're
gentlemen.
ready for football.
Philip Broberg was 98th percentile top skating speed, 80th percentile speed burst.
Okay, we're there, ladies and gentlemen. All right, let's get to the football side of things. I teased it. Can we be done with the Cincinnati Bengals now?
Oh, that was the AFC.
Who'd you think I was talking about?
I didn't know. You
What?
know?
That's a great tease on my end. You were curious.
Yeah.
I'm done with the Bengals. I know they made it look good at the end of the game and almost came back. They're 4-7 on the season, and these are the teams that they have lost to: the Chargers, the Ravens, the Eagles, the Ravens. Like they've beaten the teams that are not playoff teams. They've beaten the Giants. They've beaten the Browns. They've beaten the Raiders. They're not winning against these contenders in the postseason. So the offense looks great one week. The defense looks great one week. This has been my statement all along. They cannot put it all together. So after that loss to the Chargers, does that finally bury the Cincinnati Bengals in terms of not playoffs, because I know the AFC is trash beyond the top three, but does that finally bury the conversation of, oh, Joe Burrow can do anything?
I'm done talking about him, and I'm done talking about him for the playoffs. I get that they're only 2 games back, but Denver, better football team than them. Colts, to me, a better football team. Miami, better football team. Better defense, and now that they're healthy with Tua, I think they're a better football team. I think the Bengals are the 10th best team in the AFC. I think they are positioned perfectly as to what we are talking about. Defensively, they don't come up with enough big stops, as we saw last night when they were getting blown out, and then they got lucky to get back into that football game. And for whatever reason, things are just off. You got Jamar Chase, when he's asked by the media, I don't remember exactly, he was asked a question, he said, well, I don't call the plays, you should talk to Zach about that. He's just like, oh, this is weird vibes right now, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know how I'm feeling about this. He was asked why the Bengals can't finish games off. And he said, well, I don't know, talk to Zach about that question. Yikes. Yeah, I'm done with the Cincinnati Bengals. I know BK, if he were in here, he'd probably tell me a bag of goods as to why they'd be in the playoffs.
Of course he would.
I don't see it happening. And to our conversation when we were talking about the Blues, and Grant brought up, hey, they're within these games when they had Robert Thomas and Broberg early on with the good teams in the Western Conference. Yeah, the Bengals are in all these games too, just like the Blues were. You know what they're not doing? They're not coming away with the victories. So, yeah, I'm done talking about the Cincinnati Bengals.
Speaking of Grant, I need to allow him his victory lap, because I don't know if you remember this, T-Bone, but at the beginning of the season, we were doing the predictions for the upcoming NFL season, and then this guy over here, he just kept bringing up the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah.
And you and I laughed at him. We were like, dude, enough with the Steelers. They got
his
Russell.
reaction to Notre Dame was mine. Steelers!
It's like, enough. Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, enough. The Steelers now have won 5 straight games. Is that correct? Yeah, 5 straight games. They've just come off a victory against the Baltimore Ravens, which was the ugliest game I think I've ever watched. There were 6 field goals in that game for Pittsburgh.
To death.
There was nothing that was sexy about it. But prior to that, you beat the Washington Commanders. This team now is sitting at the top of their division in the AFC. I think they're the 3rd best team in the AFC in terms of record.
They'd be tied with the Bills for second, right?
Yeah, I guess they would. Do we give them their flowers in terms of this is going to be a team that could cause damage in the postseason?
I'll give them their flowers of, hey, you're 8-2, you're in the conversation, you basically are locked for the playoffs. This team's not doing squat in the playoffs, guys. They are Iowa football if we were watching the NFL version of it. They're going to run the football. They're going to say, Russ, throw a deep ball down the sideline. We'll just hope we catch it. And their defense is awesome. They're not going to field goal to death teams in the playoffs. No. They're going home after the first round of the playoffs.
I was told defense is your best offense.
Well, for them, yeah. I hate watching the Steelers. Absolutely hate watching them. Yet somehow they're 8-2. They probably are the best team in the freaking AFC North because Lamar can't figure them out.
Yeah.
They're going home once we start the playoffs, though. They're losing in the first round. You can bookmark this. 12:30, 11:18. T-Bone says Steelers out. Don't even care who they're playing. Out first round of the playoffs. Not a fun team to watch.
I am with you. I've been high on the Steelers to make the playoffs since preseason.
We thought you were just high.
But once it comes to playoffs, they don't have anything to lean on. You can't kick 6 field goals and expect to win a playoff game.
Yeah.
Like, it's just not going to happen. And defensively, I think they will be in any game they play, any team they play against in the playoffs, they'll be in that game because the defense will keep them in that game. But when you can't put up points, there's no aspect of their offense that is good. Like, even their run game, Najee Harris is meh. Like, it's just not going to be a winning formula.
Can I be honest, though?
You know how many total yards? Sorry, you know how many total yards they had yesterday?
Like 170 probably.
Oh, no, they had more than that, but it was low. 303. They barely got over 300 yards of total offense.
If the playoffs were to start today, Steelers would take on the Ravens.
Give me the Ravens.
I would actually
take the Steelers. I'd take the Steelers in
Lamar's
Pittsburgh.
1-4 against the Steelers.
But here's what I'll say.
Not going to field goal them to death again.
I think the Steelers can win a playoff game if they're a high seed and they have home field. I think when it comes to taking on an electric offense like Buffalo or an offense that has as many weapons as Kansas City, I don't think they can survive that.
Okay, so on the NFC side, we saw the supreme team yesterday in action, and don't read so much into the score because the Jacksonville Jaguars are just absolute trash right now.
They should be relegated to the XFL.
Yeah, that was just embarrassing on their end. But Jacksonville, Detroit, Jared Goff threw for 412 yards. He threw for 4 touchdowns. You saw 3 rushing touchdowns, 1 from Jahmyr Gibbs, 2 from David Montgomery. This is by far the best team in the NFC, and I don't think there's anybody close to what the Detroit Lions have to offer. And I'm very optimistic that this team is a Super Bowl team and also can compete with whomever's on the AFC side.
Yeah, I think they should be viewed as the favorites to win the Super Bowl. Look, I still think the Chiefs, we talked about it earlier, I still think they're the team to beat in the AFC. They're not the team to beat in the NFL. It's Detroit for me. I mean, their offense looks unbelievable. And look, you can say, hey, it was 52 points against the Jaguars. Hey, man, when they go up against the bad teams, they make sure they put up points. You know, you don't see that a lot from everybody. Looking at you, LA Rams, against the freaking Patriots this weekend. But they put up 52 against the Jaguars, 52 against the Titans, 47 against the Cowboys. Like, these are all convincing wins. And then when they go up against the pretty good teams that you kind of like, Texans, they find a way to win that football game, come back in that one on the road. Against Green Bay, they held them to just 14 points. Like, they are a very well-balanced team. Jared Goff is in the perfect system where they've got a ton of weapons around him. Yep. I think they're the team to beat for the Super Bowl. They feel like a team of destiny right now.
And the wild part is, like, they might get Aiden Hutchinson back somewhere in the postseason. I don't know if it's going to be early on or if it's going to be later on, but you at least are going to get the bye in the first round because you've been the best team in the NFC. But then on top of it, like you brought in Zadarius Smith, so you've got a lot of pieces on the defensive side. Their offense is just too dynamic for teams to game plan against. Whether it's Goff throwing the ball with his multiple weapons, but their running game is what makes me concerned for any team. How do you game plan against that team that's either got the power back in David Montgomery or the Swiss Army knife in Jahmyr Gibbs, who literally can do anything you ask him to? You don't game plan for that.
Yeah. I don't know how you stop them. And, like, if you do get too aggressive with trying to stop the run, play action, Jared Goff going to hit either St. Brown, Sam Laporta, or Williams, who's been fantastic for them this season as their number 2 option.
Yeah. One more in the NFC in our NFL quick hitters. Guys, we talked about how a couple of these divisions just aren't very appealing. The NFC South, like, we're all on the same page that nobody from the NFC South will have any playoff success. There's one team that's getting in. It's pretty obvious.
You're just mad about yesterday.
No, I'm not just mad about yesterday, although I am very pissed off. That's embarrassing. The Denver Broncos just have their way with the NFC South. The Falcons have lost 2 in a row. The Buccaneers have lost 4 in a row. Theirs is explainable because they've dealt with a lot of injuries. Sure, the Saints have won 2 in a row, but I think people are out on that. And the Panthers, who knows with that wild card. The NFC South is just a lot of Harry Houdini magic smoke, and then they disappear once the playoff comes around.
That might be generous of describing the NFC South. I don't know what to make of the Falcons because, like, I knew the Saints were good coming into the year, even though I kind of fell for it after.
You can't talk about their great offense after
weeks.
That embarrassing game against Denver.
Yeah, Carolina, we know is not. We knew they weren't going to be good, so we knew it was like, hey, it's Tampa Bay, Atlanta. Maybe they have this great race. You're right about the Bucs. They're dealing with so many injuries. Baker Mayfield's still playing incredible football to keep them in this thing, though. what do I make of the Falcons? Like, Stoltz's fantasy football team, the Falcons, are looking like a fantasy football team. Not very good.
No, they're not even your fantasy football
They
team.
look like my fan. Yeah, exactly. Yesterday, look, Broncos defense is good. It's not that much to where they should embarrassingly
Not that good.
make the Falcons look that bad. I don't know what to make of Atlanta. I thought they'd be like a 10-11 win team, and they'll probably still be in that range this year and make the playoffs. It's a lot uglier than I thought it was going to be for the Falcons. They're at a minus 30 point differential now on the season.
They are the Metropolitan Division of the NHL last season.
That was a bad season. This is a bad season watching that NFC South.
Rough.
Woof. Well, you got one more game in the NFL Week 11, and that's tonight, Cowboys and Texans, which you'll be able to hear right here on 101 ESPN, pregame beginning at 6:30. Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up next, Derek Gould on the Best Podcast in Baseball was talking about how the Cardinals can build for success moving forward, and it's touching back on past success. We'll get to that next on 101 ESPN. Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friends over at Classic Air Care, taking care of people and making people comfortable since 1926. Whether you've got a super old air conditioner heater unit that you need taken care of, or maybe you bought a brand new one and you need a new company, you need to check out their maintenance agreement. And what that is you're a part of their agreement to where twice a year they come out, they check your older unit, they clean it, they fine tune it, make sure it's good to go for the winter, for the summer. And in between, this is the best part of the maintenance agreement. In between those two visits in a year, when you have issues, if you have issues that pop up, you're on their priority list. So you call them, you say, hey, I need some look. My HVAC's making a weird noise. They're out there as soon as they can get it on the schedule, which is typically about 48 hours. And that's the benefits of the maintenance agreement. So you can schedule online to put yourself in those conversations, or you can call them today and bring a technician out. They've got incredible staff, knowledgeable technicians that can take care of what you need. Give them a call today, or you could schedule online. Just tell them Alex Ferrario sent you. That's Classic Air Care and ClassicAirCare.com.
Grant Francis here with a Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Blues finished the road trip 1-1-1 as they won in Boston on Saturday 3-2 in overtime thanks to an overtime game-winning goal by Braden Shin. And then last night lost 4-1 in Carolina. Now 2 games below 500, 17 points on the season, which puts them 3 points out of the playoffs as of right now. And for Mizzou, they fell yesterday as well, 34-30 to South Carolina. They are now 7-3 on the season. And tonight here in St. Louis, we'll have the United States men's national soccer team in town. You can see them at City Park. They're going up against Jamaica, and that one will start at 7 o'clock. I'm Grant Francis. The Sports Center update's been brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
The outline of the 80s is here, or at least maybe the Cardinals ought to borrow from the 80s. Because, like you described, the Mets, the big spending evil team to the East. Well, I can think of a big spending evil team to both the East and the West now. The Cardinals, could they build around defense? Could their past be the answer to their present?
That's Derek Gould of the Post-Dispatch on the best podcast in baseball. New episode out with Dane Perry as feel like we're having deja vu, T-Bone.
Why is that?
Referencing the past be the future for the Cardinals and saying that could defense be what gets this team to the promised land?
Yeah, bring your D in your fence and go defense.
Maybe I'm confused. Maybe I misunderstood what this past season was. Wasn't that what this past season was?
I be honest? I don't really know.
I thought, now they sold it as the offense. Look at what we got. Contreras and Arenado and Goldschmidt and Walker and Gorman.
I thought we were getting the band back together.
Too. I thought we were going back to the early 2010s. But I could have sworn that the narrative for this Cardinals team this year was pitching and defense. They spent money on Lynn and Gibson, and you went and got Sonny Gray. Your bullpen was really good. But defensively, it was, we got Mason Wynn at shortstop. Look at our infield of Wynn and Arenado and Goldschmidt, and then put Donovan and Gorman at second base. And then outfield. You didn't see Victor Scott this season beyond, the first 10, 12 games? Because Michael Ciani's defense was so good. You saw Pedro Pages for, a quarter of the season? Too much. A half of a season because they didn't like the defense of Ivan Herrera and they wanted the defense of Pedro Pages to put them in the contending mindset. Now, this might just be me because, as people like to label me, I hate the Cardinals. I hate everybody except the Blues. I thought we already went down the path of defense is how the Cardinals have success. I thought the path forward now was developing the minor league system so that you have a lot more efficient offensive players and your pitching can withstand the dominant that you need.
Yeah, I think last year they tried to kind of implement this of pitching and defense. And when I say pitching and defense, I mean kind of like what you got, which is, hey, we're not going to strike out a ton of guys. We're going to let them put the ball in play, and we're going to go, and we're just going to be one of the best defensive teams you see. You think back to, the 2015 team. They were kind of that a little bit, pitching and defense. You think back to the 2021 Cardinals. They were definitely that, where it was, hey, don't really look at the pitching. John Lester, J. Happ, they're kind of doing their thing with Adam Wainwright. But look at that defense. What do they have, 5 gold gloves on that team or 4 gold gloves on that team? They won the team defensive award. Look, what I'm about to say, I'm not going to say this and say that you just don't worry about defense because you saw the Yankees and how embarrassingly bad they were defensively this year, and it led to that costing them a World Series. You do need to be okay at defense, but I don't think you're building this moving forward around pitching and defense. I think you're building this around strikeouts and slugging. That's it. It's the modern game. The main approach moving forward isn't, let's go back to the 80s and let's get back to that. Hey, let's pitch to contact. Let's be really good defensively all around the diamond.
I've heard that before, too. Pitch to contact.
No, that's not the formula for modern baseball. Now, I do think one thing that can be taken away from the 80s, if you will, and not so much where you're going to have a guy steal 100 bases, but I do think there is more of an element that can be added to the Cardinals moving forward of more speed on the base paths, being a more athletic team. Though Mason Wynn is a guy that can probably steal 30 bases, he's like really the only guy, unless there's someone I'm forgetting, that has probably got that kind of capability on the base paths.
I mean,
like
Victor Scott, if you see him.
Sure, Victor Scott, he's one. But again, to your point, if you see him. But like Newpar's not really that guy. Walker's not that guy.
Donovan's not that guy.
Yeah, like you've got guys that could be okay base stealers, but I think there is something that you can build around moving forward. But I think the main thing, like when you look at, okay, the Cardinals get back to winning after this refresh or whatever you want to call it, what is the two things that they need to focus on the most? What is the path forward? It isn't going back to your past and saying, oh, let's just build like we did back in the 2010s or the 80s or well, they weren't good in the 90s, but let's not go back to the past.
Oh, McGuire, man.
You need to stick with the present, and that is you got to have guys that slug the baseball, and they've got some of those. You know, they got to figure out what they have in Nolan Gorman, for example. That's why I don't really want to move him because he has the best pure power on the team, and you've got to have strikeouts. The defense that I'll hear the argument on of, oh, well, they got to be good defensively. Yeah, they got to be good defensively by not having the ball hit a bat, which is strikeouts. Those are the two things, and you can say, well, I hate how baseball is building the same way across organizations. I know, it sucks. That's the way you're going to win. You got to have strikeouts from your pitching staff as a whole, not just in one guy and then like one reliever. As a whole, you've got to have swing and miss stuff. Then as an offense, I've been saying it since I joined this show back in like 2021. Slug, baby, slug. It's about power. Do you hit for power? Because you're not going to score runs with single, single, single. You saw that this year from the Cardinals. Where do you do the damage? How do you put up the crooked numbers? How do you score in October? It's by hitting for power.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe I'm just misremembering it, but even the last time that we saw a successful Cardinals team on the offensive side, going back to 2019, like that was a team that was good defensively, but they were really good offensively. And then, like, you think back to when the teams were winning in that window, the late 2000s to early 2010s, when they were finding themselves in the World Series conversation. Yeah, their defense was good, but you know what they had? They had superstars on the offensive side and guys who were lockdown pitchers for you on the pitching side. So it's hard for me to look at defense moving forward as how this team gets back to relevance. But then Dane Perry on the best podcast in baseball had this to say about changing expectations for the Cardinals.
Does this get us back to win 87 games and see what happens? You know, or is there a road toward true excellence like we saw in the 2000s? Or is the new reality for the Cardinals now that you've got, you know, in my opinion, a lot of homogeneity throughout front offices and similar thinking? Yeah. Or are the Cardinals now the current Nebraska football where you aspire to make a bowl game? You know what I mean? As opposed to aspiring to win the national championship.
Ooh, tying them to the Nebraska football there, just where you're just aspiring to get there. If I could be honest, I kind of feel like that's where the Cardinals are at right now. But they shouldn't be developing, or they shouldn't be focusing on that moving forward. Like, they've been in this mindset of, well, let's just get to 80-something wins and we'll see what happens. No, you need to get the hell away from that mindset and start getting into, let's develop guys who can get us beyond being an 86, 87-win team and just get in on the wild card. The NL Central, we know, has not been good, but Milwaukee has found ways to continue to win the NL Central. Man, you shouldn't be developing as let's just see what happens and we get in. You should be developing as let's go find a staff like Milwaukee's been finding and churning guys out of their minor leagues so we can go win the NL Central.
I think for the Cardinals, for them to get back to what Dane was talking about there, you know, does this refresh, this investment in the minor leagues, will it lead to them getting back to where they were in the 2000s? Probably not in the early going. Like, if we're being honest, they're so far behind in modern baseball that they kind of have to hope to become the modern day Nebraska first, right? They've got to be the team that you kind of look at and go, okay, they're kind of back in it. They're building for 87 wins. And they can't do what they did in the 2000s, which was, hey, we're ahead of the times on baseball. You know, we've got the formula. We've got the drafting development formula. The Cardinal way is the way that everybody wanted to implement within their organization. Well, you can't get back to that until you catch up first, you know, and they are so far behind, that until they can catch up, can they then start to try and stride ahead and try and get ahead of everybody else in baseball? I do think there is a path. at some point to where they can get back to that 2000s formula where everybody's looking at them going, okay, we got to implement whatever the Cardinals are doing. But that's years away because they've got to catch up first, and the game is going to continue to evolve while they're still playing catch up. Once they catch up, then they can set their sights on being the national contender like Nebraska used to be. But for right now, yeah, I think expectations have changed for the Cardinals, both I don't want to say from a fan's perspective because I think fans should be still striding for them to be a championship contender year in and year out. But I think within that organization, it has changed a little bit because they are so far behind.
Yeah, and I think before you can get back to that contending mindset, you're going to have to develop a icon to build around. And if you're moving on from all of these guys that you thought you were there with, like you've got to develop that guy, whether it's Mason Wynn, whether it's Jordan Walker, whether it's Nolan Gorman. Before you can even talk about being something other than Nebraska football, you're going to have to develop some type of star that can carry your team out of wherever you're at. And that's where the minor league development comes into play. Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. We'll take a break. We'll come back, hit the junk drawer next on 101 ESPN. right, BK and Ferrario, Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Let's dive into the junk drawer and hand it over to T-Bone.
All right, guys. Junk drawer, this basically happened Friday night.
Friday
I think
night.
this fits for the junk drawer because what the hell was that in Tyson versus Paul?
What are you referring in that?
Well,
are you referring to the fight or the stream?
Both. Because the stream, that was the single worst viewing experience I have ever had watching a sporting event.
You don't like watching something that's just granulated for the entirety of your night?
No. How am I going to watch football on Christmas this way?
I didn't even get to see the Mike Tyson cheek pop out on Netflix because it was freaking buffering.
And I'm glad my screen didn't freeze on it either.
No, I wanted to see it live.
It was unbelievable how bad it was. And it wasn't, for me, it wasn't too bad in
mine
the
was
previous
awful.
fights. Oh, was it really?
Yeah, mine was awful from the two females that were fighting until the end of the Tyson fight.
That's
I had to
about
watch
when
it on
mine
my
started.
phone.
Yeah, well, you know where I had to go to watch the Tyson and Paul fight? No, but would have been a good call. I ended up going on Twitter. You know who was live streaming it?
Barstool?
No,
Who?
It's even sadder than Barstool. Antonio Brown was at the event in a
What are you doing, man?
in a suite and was live streaming the fight from Twitter and basically just zoomed in on the scoreboard there to
Smart
watch
by
it.
Antonio Brown.
Dude, he had 84,000 people on his Twitter account watching
smart.
it, and I was one of them.
I was so pissed off because I thought it was my Wi-Fi. Like, I thought it was me, and I kept turning it off and turning it back on. I restarted my Fire Stick like 7 times, and it kept doing it. I'm like, what the hell? And then so I'm watching it on my phone because for some reason my cellular data was better for Netflix than my Wi-Fi. But then I started seeing everybody commenting on it. I'm like, oh, okay, this is a Netflix thing. And then so then I just kept it on, and it just would buffer for 15 minutes. And then it would turn back on. But the part that bothered me so much is like it would turn back on at the worst time when like they're sitting ringside after a round and it's like, wait, what just happened? And then it would just go buffer one more time.
So the viewing experience itself
that was
terrible.
trash, and Netflix needs to figure itself out before these NFL
they
games.
clearly were not ready, which was a fear, but I thought, oh, Netflix, they're big time. They should have this figured
How is
out.
that a fear, though? Like, their excuse for it was, oh, we didn't think Jake Paul was going to carry that much viewers. That had nothing to do with Jake Paul and everything to do with Mike Tyson.
It was both, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you got Jake Paul, who's whether you like him or hate him, you're going to watch him.
He's a
and then
young
it's
person.
Mike Tyson, who you're going to come back to watch fight.
It's like, how do you not plan? And it was like, I think they said it was on 19 different countries. It's like, how do you not plan for that if you're Netflix? Oh, well, we didn't think it was going to be that many viewers.
So
The fight, though.
Oh, the fight belongs in the junk drawer, too, because the fight was terrible.
It was awful.
Jake Paul, clearly, I mean, he could have knocked out Mike Tyson, let's be honest, because Tyson can't move.
It's funny you say that. I would say the opposite of that. It was very clear Mike Tyson could have ended that fight. He chose not to.
For me, there was nothing that I saw that showed Mike Tyson could box.
Oh, man.
The only reason I believe he could knock me out is because I don't box.
There were 7 instances in the first 3 rounds where Paul took a swing and he left his protecting glove down, and Tyson went and then hesitated. There were so many moments where it felt like, uh-oh, and then he wouldn't do it. That's where I got infuriated, because you saw it the one way. I saw it to where it's like, dude, this match should be a lot more intense, but Tyson is not throwing punches.
I saw, and you say like he missed those opportunities. I think it's because he's old. I think you saw that Tyson, and BK was right going into this. Tyson's just not that guy at this. I say at this point. I mean, it's impressive he was out there at 58, but he had a knee brace on. He could barely move around in the rink. Jake Paul clearly had opportunities to where if he wanted to, especially as that fight kept going and was lasting longer, getting deeper into the rounds, to knock him out, and he chose not to because it was, oh, I don't really want to take out one of the best ever. And Jake Paul basically said that post-game. Like when he had his press conference, he basically said, like, yeah, I probably could have knocked him out, and I basically decided not to.
Of course he's going to say that.
One of the worst viewing experiences. I can't believe this thing got hyped this much.
I just got so infuriated because, everything that was coming out, and, who knows if it's truthful or not, but there were so many things that were like, oh, it was in the agreement that Tyson couldn't get paid unless he went 5 rounds, and if he knocked out Paul, blah, blah, blah. I'm just done with boxing in general, because it all feels fake to me now. Like, it all feels, and it should have. That's on me. Look, there was a part of me that just was childhood Alex that was excited because it was Tyson, but that's on me for not realizing that boxing is just staged. Jake Paul's entire career in boxing has been staged. The dude's a good fighter. I'll give it to him. The whole thing has been staged his entire time. Like, everybody he fights is either some dude who's retired or somebody who's never boxed before. Tyson hasn't fought since it was a staged COVID match against Roy Jones Jr. I should have known what I was getting myself into. I was very upset with myself. Not that I watched it, but that I sat around and waited for the buffering to figure itself out.
I was upset at both. I was upset at Netflix and one of the worst viewing experiences I've ever had. And I was upset that someone as I even said on Friday or Thursday, oh, I don't have a bunch of interest in it. I decided, you know what? I'm a sports guy. I know we're probably going to talk about this on the show at some point. I should watch this. Terrible.
Can we, real quick here, get some breaking news on the junk drawer?
Breaking news on the whoa.
Is this related to Tyson?
101 ESPN breaking news alert.
Elliot Friedman reporting that Kasperi Kapanen has been placed on waivers.
Okay, well then, ladies and gentlemen, we have some interesting nuggets to get into because I think that is tied to a player that could be returning from an injury. We'll discuss that on the other side. And are the Blues still stuck in the muddy middle? That's next on 101 ESPN. Alex Ferrario back with you and back with my insurance agent, Tracy Bibb. Truly is the best when it comes to taking care of your family, when it comes to your home and car insurance. And Tracy, I always tell people about the incredible customer service that they get with Tracy Bibb. Explain a little bit more to our listeners.
Insurance agency. So we have a dedicated team here that is available to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Also, you've got a direct line to give us a call if you need help. You can text us, you can email us, you can even Facebook me if you need to get a hold of me. But not only that is we have a claims person on staff. So say you're going through a claim and something's not quite working right, or you have questions, we've got a claims person that will help you out with that. We have a review specialist who reaches out one time a year just to make sure we're reviewing your policies in case there's any changes or any new discounts. So we take customer service to another level.
She's always available for you, always there to take care of you. It's why you need to call her today. You can contact Tracy Bibb anyway, like she just told you, but you can call her 314-328-4260 and find out about that free non-committal quote. Super simple with Tracy. Give her a call today. It's no fib. You're always in great hands with the Bibb. Tracy, thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Go Blues.
Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis. I'm Alex Ferrario. BK Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. So Grant had the breaking news there at the end of our previous segments, and if you missed it, Elliot Friedman tweeting out 5 minutes ago that Kasperi Kapanen has been placed on waivers. So what that means, of course, is he's a one-way contract. He has to go through waivers. Every team has the chance to claim him, and if he doesn't get claimed by tomorrow at 1 o'clock St. Louis time, then he will clear waivers and head to the American Hockey League. So originally, my tinfoil theory was, okay, so Kasperi Kapanen, he's back, or he's going down to waivers, and they're clearing up a roster spot so that they can activate Robert Thomas. And if you missed this earlier, we were discussing Robert Thomas, potentially, as Joe Vitale mentioned in our pregame yesterday, he could be returning for the Blues as soon as Thursday against the San Jose Sharks. So unless I'm just completely not understanding this right, according to Puckpedia right now, the Blues are carrying 13 forwards, 14, but Robert Thomas is on the injured list, 7 defensemen, and then 2 goaltenders. So they're at 23-man roster right now. So the Kapanen news would send him down and clear up that roster spot. You don't clear up a roster spot unless somebody is going to be activated off of your roster. And that's where they're at, because I was looking at that wrong, T-Bone. They say that there's 14 forwards. 14 is without Robert Thomas. So you're at 14. Kapanen is at 14th forward. So you're at 23. So you make this move to, 1, clear up a roster spot if somebody is coming off of IR, or 2, you want to get that player off the roster so that you stop playing him. Here's the part that I really wonder if it's just they're moving on from him to get him off of the roster so you stop using him in your lineup. Because P.O. Joseph went back to St. Louis from that injury that took place, I believe, against the Buffalo Sabres. If Thomas is coming off of IR, you could put P.O. Joseph on IR, and then that opens up the same roster spot and you don't have to waive a player. So some of this I do think is tied to Kasperi Kapanen and Robert Thomas potentially being available for tomorrow's game. But I also wonder if this is just Doug Armstrong saying, okay, enough with this. Kapanen, I don't think Kapanen has played since, he played the Buffalo Sabres game, if I'm not, he played Buffalo, he played Washington. It's been a revolving door of position players. So some of this might be Robert Thomas. We won't know because the Blues don't skate today. But some of this also might be the Blues being like, all right, let's take one guy off of the list so that you've got Bolduc and Texier and you finally start playing one of these players.
Yeah, I think that this is a clear sign that you're going to see Thomas, whether he's activated for the game tomorrow night or they are just getting ahead of this and placing Kapanen on waivers and they will activate Thomas for maybe it's Thursday's game. Either way, I think this is the sign of, hey, Robert Thomas is getting ready to return from IR.
Yeah.
I do wonder if some of it is tied to potentially, hey, we got to play Bolduc more, but you still have Texier that's in this conversation. Like, you're still with 14 forwards, so you really haven't ended up clearing out a logjam, really.
Yeah.
So I think it just goes to show you that Armstrong is trying to take one piece away, because we were talking off air. Wouldn't this be the spot where maybe you looked at and said maybe we send down Bolduc?
Absolutely, because
you haven't played him in the top 6, which is what Army stated was what they were going to. He's going to be up here. He's going to be in the top 6.
Right.
Okay, well, he hasn't done that. But, okay, I would hear, okay, well, maybe if he's playing in the top 9, it's kind of, maybe that's what his role ends up being for the Blues. I can see how you came up here. He's just, to your point on the revolving door, he's in that revolving door right now.
And that's the part for me of why Kapanen. And look, Kapanen, somebody texted in and said, what was the point of bringing him back on a $1 million? Look, it's insurance.
Good question.
He was $1 million. It was insurance. You needed a player that was available as the 14th forward. Here's a question for you guys. Who comes out of the lineup when Robert Thomas is back? Pretty obvious who it is, right? It's Texier or / Bolduc. So where's Bolduc playing? Who comes out for Bolduc if Thomas goes back into the lineup for you? You taking Joseph out?
No.
You taking Sundqvist out?
I'd hear an argument on that, but I don't think they'll do it.
Well, they won't because of the center position.
My guess is they'll take Walker out.
You're going to break up the one line that has been at least consistent for you from start to finish?
I'm not telling you that I would do it, but isn't that been the common theme for Nathan Walker's time in St. Louis? Hey, you're playing pretty well.
Yeah.
Now go enjoy the press box.
Exactly.
We've got popcorn.
You're generating, and it's not great popcorn. Oh. Anyway.
Stale.
Yeah.
Butter can't save that.
If you bring back, look, the first part of this is really good news for the Blues, because if Kapanen's going down, it's opening up a roster spot, which all intents purposes, you're going to be putting him down through waivers and bringing somebody back, which could mean Robert Thomas might even play against Minnesota, which that would just be freaking insane. That's 4 weeks exactly. I still don't agree with the decision of keeping Bolduc on this roster and sending down a Kasperi Kapanen. And this is the point I want to get to next. So Sean McIndoe of The Athletic put together this article. Just kind of a power rankings weekly where guys are at bottom 5, top 5 that are chasing a cup. And then he did a larger portion surrounding the Blues. And I want to read this to you guys and then let me cook for 2 seconds. Quote, maybe that wouldn't even be the worst thing that could happen. Doug Armstrong didn't exactly go all in on this roster, but you don't use multiple offer sheets and sign a 39-year-old Ryan Suter because you're rebuilding. This is an older team with a middling pipeline and just enough talent and goaltending to hang around the playoff perimeter without ever actually scaring anyone. The, quote, stuck in the middle warning sign on the dashboard has been flashing for a while now, and maybe falling out of the race entirely by December would be the nudge the team needs to start thinking long-term. You have to wonder how Armstrong would feel about that, given he has this season and next left as GM before the succession plan to Steen kicks in. Does he want to spend the final seasons building for the next generation, or is this all about chasing one more championship? As Will Ferrell said in Old School, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. I don't know if Doug Armstrong was ever chasing championships with this offseason move. And I was going to argue a little bit of like the stuck in the middle, but this decision goes and proves it for me right now. Why are we moving on from a Kapanen so that you can not play Zach Bolduc again? I understand they'll push back and say, well, it gives them an opportunity to learn at the NHL level. Fine, but if you're playing him once every 3 games, he's not learning what he needs to learn sitting up in the press box. You need game action. Mike McKenna told us that on Friday. At some point, you need confidence for young players. And right now, you're not getting it on the 4th line, and you're not going to be getting it from the press box. So it's great news that Robert Thomas could be back, and that's at least an optimistic portion for the Blues to kind of get back into their winning ways. But I hate the decision to do this with Kapanen and not Bolduc, to where Bolduc wouldn't have to clear waivers and he can go in the AHL and get some reps.
Yeah, I'm with you. And like, I'm not even all that upset of like, oh, Kapanen. But I do think they are stuck in the middle. And I think their actions are showing that. We talked about this on Friday. You know, they're trying to balance, hey, we got to try and win these games while also developing the young guys, but yet the young guys aren't playing. Bolduc's in the press box. He continues to be in the rotating door. And I do think if he's up here, he needs to be playing, not sitting in the press box. We talked about it. We got into it on Friday about how they handled Jordan Kyrou in the final minutes of games that are tied. We know what they did that again in Boston. In that Boston game, he didn't play, what was it, the final 3 minutes before they went to overtime and ended up getting both points. They're clearly stuck in the middle, that they're trying to have their cake and eat it too, where they're trying to make the playoffs while also developing these young guys, and they're having a really tough time of it. You know, I think to your point of why did they bring in Kapanen, it was to be a 14th forward. Okay, that makes sense. And if you're not going to play Bolduc, then Bolduc probably should be the guy that goes down in this scenario, where he can go play in the AHL, to where he can build some confidence, go play on the wing, go play with Dvorsky potentially down there in the AHL, and just constantly be getting reps. I don't think it benefits him. I think you're spot on. I don't think it benefits him to just be sitting in the press box. I think there are times where 1-2 games can make sense of, hey, like I think you brought up when you guys did a Last Man Blues podcast of Robert Thomas. Kind of sat in there in a 4-game stretch, then was immediately inserted back in the lineup. We haven't really seen that with Bolduc. He's kind of went through a 3-4 game stretch, got back in the lineup, and then got pulled right back out of the lineup. So it's clear it's not let's have him go up there for like 3 games, just watch. He can learn up there. No, they're clearly doing this performance-wise. It isn't a learning thing. It is, hey, he wasn't good this game, he's going back up in the press box. And I don't think that benefits him for a young player that needs to be growing for the St. Louis Blues. Maybe he's not a part of their core. Maybe that's what they're telling us with their actions is, hey, we don't think he's a guy that's going to be a part of this core moving forward. Yeah. I'd like to know more about him.
Absolutely. And a couple of other things, because Jared just tweeted this out, our Blues insider for The Athletic. You know, yes, it could be Robert Thomas playing. The part that I will kind of pump the brakes on is he has not skated with like a team practice with actual physicality. Now, that's not going to happen today because they're off. It's not going to happen tomorrow because it's a morning skate. So Wednesday, if you see him skating on Wednesday in like an actual practice, then maybe it can happen on Thursday. But JR also brought up a really good point. This also could just be the Blues trying to save a little cap space, save a little salary. That's $1 million that, I mean, we've talked a lot about how the Blues are, $1 million over the salary cap in terms of their LTIR money. This could just be a spot where they look, we don't really know where he's playing, hasn't really done anything and taken the spot, saves us $1 million, and let's say Thomas doesn't come back until Saturday against, I think it's the Devils that they play, or the Rangers. It does give you 2 games to play Bolduc and Texier. I'm with you on the, what's with this revolving door? Play one of them and stick with it, but it does give you 2 games with that roster spot if you don't force Robert Thomas back right away.
I wonder if this road trip was a make or break for one of those players, because you saw Kapanen play against Buffalo, Bolduc played against Boston, and then Texier played against Carolina. Now in those games, Kapanen struggled. He was a -1, didn't have a shot on goal, and all he had was a hit. And then you look at Bolduc, he had a shot on goal. He was an even. He didn't do too much either, but Texier had 4 shots on goal, 2 hits he was creating. I just wonder if maybe this little stretch of these last 3 games was, okay, let's play each of these players, see what they do for us, and then make a decision from there.
Yeah. So, again, if you missed it, Elliot Friedman reporting that Kasperi Kapanen, I just did what BK does. Stop pressing the mic, Alex. Friedman reporting that Kasperi Kapanen on waivers. We'll find out if he's claimed or not tomorrow around the 12 o'clock hour. But him being on waivers could signify that another roster move is corresponding potentially tomorrow, which might be Robert Thomas coming off of the injured reserve list. With Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. We'll take a break. We'll come back. You send us a scenario. We will tell you if we are in or out. 314-399-9646. We'll get to that next on 101 ESPN. Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friends at Ted Drew's famous frozen custard off of Chippewa that has been taking care of people's appetite for desserts since 1929. 95 years, 4 generations of families have been serving St. Louisans that famous frozen custard, but it's all about consistency and tradition. Again, 95 years they've been working on this frozen custard for people, but you go out there on the weekend, you go out there on a weeknight, and you just see all of the families and friends that are building those traditions, sitting in the back of their car, just talking, enjoying that frozen custard, even when it's 40 degrees outside. That frozen custard and the traditions that you're building are always so memorable. I still have all of mine from when I was 8, 9, 10 years old. We'd go out there as a family and just sit and spend time together. I built those traditions with my daughters today. They've got specialty flavors for you. If you're in the blues mood, you can go get the blue notes, or maybe you're in the fall mood. They've got the great pumpkin. While you're out there, too, walk across the parking lot, check out their gift shop where you can shop for Ted Drew's apparel. You can get Ted Drew's souvenirs, Ted Drew's gift cards, all of them available for you at the famous frozen destination off of Chippewa. Ted Drew's famous frozen custard. It really is good, guys and gals.
ESPN, are you in or are you out? It's in or out with BK and Ferrario.
Four 399-9646 Air Comfort Service text line. Also our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. That's where our studio cams are at Air Alliance Team. You can also listen on the 101 ESPN app. That's brought to you by Schaefer Door Company. So plenty of options for you to tune in to BK and Ferrario. And now we get to in or out. You send us a scenario. We will tell you if we are in or out. I'll start this one off, boys. In or out? Robert Thomas plays before the end of this week.
Oh, in. I don't think you make the Kapanen move unless you thought there's a chance Thomas plays in, what was this, a 2-game homestand?
Yeah,
right?
2-game, Tuesday, Thursday.
My guess is he plays on one of those 2 games. I'm going to lean more towards Thursday, but I could see a scenario where he plays on Tuesday, but I'm definitely in on this.
I'm more towards Saturday.
That's kind of where I am.
Yeah, I think it's going to be Saturday that he's going to be back
It's
in the
just weird
lineup.
that you make the decision now, because if it's Saturday, you push it back a little bit, because that's the part why I'm hesitant to say it's on Tuesday. He hasn't skated with the team yet, and look back to Matthew Joseph. Like, he skated with the no contact jersey a couple of times, but until he actually did a team skate, that was when they were like, okay, is he available to you now? So you're not team skating today. He's probably skating by himself. Tomorrow, you're not doing a team skate. It's a morning skate. I'd expect him to be out there. Wednesday, you get one in, but I got to imagine you want to see how he reacts to that. So I'm leaning towards Saturday. I think the start of that road trip is where you see Robert Thomas play.
Guys, in or out? The 2 teams that we saw in last year's Super Bowl, the Chiefs and 49ers, will not take part in this year's Super Bowl contest.
So in or out, both will not take place, or one or the other?
Both will not be in this year's Super Bowl. In or out? I framed that very poorly.
No, you did. You were fine. I'm going to say in, because the Chiefs will be there. I don't believe the 49ers will be there. I believe the Chiefs will still be there. As great as it is that Josh Allen beat Kansas City, one, it was in Buffalo, which my expectation would be the Chiefs are still going to probably have the home field advantage unless they fall apart again. 2 is the regular season, and I've seen this 4 other times, and it has not mattered. So I'm out. I think the Chiefs will be there. I'm done on the 49ers, though. I think the Detroit Lions beat the 49ers regardless if they're healthy or not.
Yeah, I'm right in lockstep with you. I'm not betting against the Chiefs, not making it back. I think they are the favorite still to get there, despite what Buffalo just did this past Sunday. 49ers, though, I'm still surprised by how poor they've been this season. But I don't see them making it back. This is not the same 49ers team we've seen in the past years.
Granko, what do you got?
In or out, Jordan Kyrou will finish this season as a plus.
I'll say in. I mean, he's fixed his plus-minus problem. Now, sometimes it's been get off the ice before you get the minus, and the next thing you know, a goal goes in.
That counts as a plus.
It does count as a plus.
Not as a minus, I should say.
He's played well. I shouldn't say well. He's played more responsible in areas that he was not responsible last season. So, yeah, I think he's going to be a point-per-game player this season, and I think he'll be in the positive when it comes to plus-minus.
I'll say in as well. I think his all-around game looks way better than it did even last year. And last year, I thought he took steps in the right direction. Mm-hmm. But there's been multiple times now where I can look back on plays. Now, you are right. There have been a couple of times where he happens to get off the ice right before a goal ends up going in, which doesn't go towards his numbers. But there's multiple times this season where I've said, hey, Kyrou won that board battle. Hey, look, Kyrou was on the back check there and helped break up that play in front of the net. I think he did that in the last Boston game or 2 Boston games ago. But I do think he's going to finish as a plus. Now, I don't think it's going to be anything like spectacular, like plus 20, plus 30.
I agree.
He'll probably be kind of where he's at about
plus
now.
5,
like
plus
plus
6.
2, plus 5, somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
But I do think he will be a positive this year.
All right. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think his offense is going to take off at some point, too. He always is a slow starter. Right now, he's at an 8.8% shooting percentage. He usually finishes within that 12 to 14% range. So the fact that he's a plus at this point with probably, hopefully for him, the worst stretch of offensive production of the year, that's a pretty good sign for him.
314-399-9646, Air Comfort Service text line. Also, our YouTube channel, 101 ESPN STL. In or out, Luther Burden sits out one of the 2 final games for Mizzou.
Out. I don't think he gives up on his teammates like that, and it would be a terrible look, in my opinion, if he did it for the final 2 games. The game he'll sit out will be the bowl game. The bowl game means nothing. It's nothing more than essentially a scrimmage. I don't think he's going to sit out the final 2 games. I'm not worried about that. He'll probably sit out the bowl game. A lot of high draft picks will do that, but I'm out. He ain't sitting the final 2 games.
Yeah, it's kind of where I'm at as well. I don't think he's going to sit out for a regular season game when you have the chance to get to 9 wins. You don't just quit on the if you do that definitely, I would imagine, impacts stock conversation in the draft if you're a team when you're looking at Luther Burden, be like, yeah, but he gave up on his team the final 2 games of the regular season. In or out, Josh Allen should be the MVP favorite right now in the NFL.
He certainly made it a lot closer than I was expecting. I think I'm going to say out. I still think it should be Lamar. Lamar's thrown for 2,800 passing yards. He's second in the league right now in passing yards. Meanwhile, Josh Allen is 7th. And then you look at touchdowns, 25 for Lamar compared to Josh Allen's 18. Josh Allen had a great game against the Kansas City Chiefs, not taking that away from him, and he does use his legs, but so does Lamar. I think Lamar's been the better player so far. I still think Lamar Jackson should be the MVP.
It's interesting because, yeah, you look at the interceptions too. Lamar only has 3. That's what I was going to say, because Josh Allen, what he has done this season in comparison to prior years, he's gotten his interceptions way down. He's only thrown 5 this season. But the fact that at this point, Lamar has 7 more touchdowns than him and 2 fewer interceptions, it's going to be tough to make a case unless Josh Allen goes off in terms of touchdowns and Lamar takes a step back over the next few weeks. But it's going to be hard to make that case.
I'm in. I look at the Baltimore Ravens. They've got the Chargers next. I mean, that could be a loss depending on how your defense plays against that offense and how your offense might struggle against a defense like the Chargers. Eagles, Ravens, probably going to win that one. Ravens, Giants, absolutely you win that one. You've got the Ravens, Steelers, and we just saw the Steelers. Now, it could go either way. If the Ravens lose 1 or 2 more games, I think the Bills could be the top team in the AFC. Now, they've got to beat the Lions and 49ers and Rams. Those are not easy opponents, but then they got the Jets and Patriots twice. I'm going to say in because I think by the end of the season, the Bills will have the best record, and that's going to push them a little bit further in terms of the MVP conversation. In or out, from the 3-1-4, we see Philip Broberg back by the middle of December.
Ooh. That's a tough one.
Sorry, they said Broberg or Letty by the middle of December.
It's so hard to tell because neither of them have skated yet.
Yeah.
Like
Broberg, I believe he hadn't even touched the ice yet.
Yeah, I would say probably I would expect Letty back before Broberg because Letty's has been going on for a little bit longer, and they didn't make it out to be a huge deal at first when Letty went down. It's just lingered and lingered now. But again, there's no real timetable for either of them that's been talked about, so it's really hard to speculate on that.
Yeah, I'm going to say out as well. I mean, neither really skating. Broberg, you really want to be cautious with coming off of a knee injury.
Yeah, totally.
We've talked about him being the number 1 defenseman potentially was your best defenseman prior to the injury. I'll say out. I don't think you're going to see either of those guys prior to that.
In or out for the 3-1-4, Robert Thomas still finishes the season as a point-per-game player.
What was he at before he got hurt? It was only 7 games. So
yeah, I think he was at like 6 points.
Yeah, 1 goal, 5 assists. Yeah. I'll say in. I think he'll still be a point per game player. It'll be like in the 60-point range, somewhere in that range.
because you miss 12 games if you stay healthy the rest of the way.
I'll say in though. I still think he'll be a point per game player. I don't know if he'll take those steps to where you look at it and you say, oh, well, if these points that paced out to you would have been the 100-point guy that we talked about early on, because I just don't think they've got the guys around him to get him to that spot. But I'll say point per game, sure.
Where does he go when he gets back into the lineup? I mean, obviously, you put him at the top line, but...
Fourth line
wing,
get him
react.
Yeah.
He's got to work his way back up to the top line for him.
Like the kids have to do.
Do you break up obviously you break up other lines, but what lines do you break up? We were talking about this yesterday, Grant, before pregame, like what you do with the line combinations once he comes back.
You know, it's tough because I want to keep that WTF line together because they've been so effective. I brought it up to you yesterday that I would love to see that third line back together that it was at the beginning of the season with Matthew,
Holloway,
Joseph, Shin, and Holloway because they were so great. Then you probably have, not joking, one of the best top 6 or bottom 6s in the league. Mm-hmm. I think if you can get Kyrou, Buchnevich, and Thomas going, which I know they don't want to move Buchnevich back to the wing.
How could we do that?
I would love to see that. That's what I would love to see if Thomas comes. If it doesn't work, fine, then break it up. But we've seen that be effective in the past. We've also seen it not work in the past. But give it another chance, see if it works, because if it does, that's your best chance to have the most offensive production possible.
I do wonder. I mean, we saw it for, what was it, a game where they broke up, or they didn't break up, moved Booch off of the center position.
Yeah, it was the one game where they put Shen up there.
I wonder if they will explore that when Thomas comes back, because you feel a little bit better about where you are. Now, granted, the fact that they only did it for one game and then we're like, whoa.
Yeah, because they saw how awful it was where they had the other guys at the center position.
Yeah, like if I had to guess, my guess is what they're probably going to do is they will basically swap Thomas and Buchnevich 1-for-1. So Thomas will be with Neighbors and Kyrou. Shen will probably bump to, I guess, wing. Now, where Shen goes, I don't really know, because I think you would go Sod, Booch, Holloway, and then Shen is a part of your fourth line?
Yeah.
Centering the fourth line, maybe?
I think what I would do is I would do what you said. You're desperate for offense right now. Booch has been great, but you have not been getting the production from him. I would put Thomas with Booch and Neighbors, and then Shen would move down with Kyrou and Holloway. Your third line would be Sod, Sundquist, and Joseph, and then you got the WTF line as your fourth line. I mean, or you use the WTF line as the third line, but you need offense from your top six right now. We were talking about this yesterday. Your shooting percentage, there's two of your top six guys have a shooting percentage less than 8%. Like, you need more from them, and Pavel Buchnevich's offense is dissipated. So, again, not expected to happen right away. We'll have to wait till tomorrow when the Blues skate to find out with Robert Thomas. But with the Kapanen news of him being on waivers, you could see Robert Thomas activated at some point later this week. Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up next, Georgia's win over Tennessee opened up a ripple effect in the SEC with the rankings, and one guy I think has solidified himself in the Heisman conversation. We'll get to that next here on 101 ESPN. Alex Ferrario with you, and look, with Monday Night Football on the slate tonight, Cowboys and Texans, it's time to download that Circa Sports Illinois app and drop in a good old-fashioned Ferrario parlay. Why do I say that? Because when you put together those big parlays over on Circa Sports Illinois, you are bringing in the most money possible. They're not limiting you based off of winnings. Everyone is getting the same limits, unlike other sports books, when you put together those big parlays or those future bets. So for tonight, I'm saying the over hits between the Texans and Cowboys. I'm picking the Texans on the money line, and with Nico Collins returning, I'm picking him as the first touchdown scorer. Those three parlays put together, plus 2,300. You do that over on any other sports book, you're looking at plus 1,700. So you're bringing in the most money possible thanks to Circa Sports Illinois. They're so confident in it, they tell you to go compare the lines. They know you'll be back with Circa Sports Illinois. So download the app today. Plus, when you're dealing with them, you're dealing with actual people, not robots on the other side. Circa Sports Illinois. If you or someone you know may have a problem with gambling, call 1-800-GAMBLER or text ILGAMB to 833-234.
Grant Francis here with a SportsCenter update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Blues over the weekend picked up 1 win and 1 loss. They beat Boston in overtime on Saturday 3-2, and they lost yesterday 4-1 in Carolina. They're now 8-10-1 on the season. 3 points behind the final wild card spot in the Western Conference. And for Mizzou, they also dropped their game yesterday 34-30 to South Carolina. They are now 7-3 on the season. Tonight here on 101 ESPN, you can catch Monday Night Football. It'll be Cowboys and Texans, and that pregame will start for you at 6:30. I'm Grant Francis. The SportsCenter update's been driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
So with Mizzou losing to South Carolina over the weekend, we all are in agreement. It's the end of the road. Sorry, I'll sing that on for BK tomorrow when he's back. But we also saw the SEC just open up wide for what's going to take place with this college football rankings. And along with Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. So we see number 12 Georgia take down Tennessee 31-17. And at the time last week, we were talking about Georgia potentially being out of the playoff conversation. They lose the previous week, you lose against Tennessee, you're talking about just being done as a 3-loss team in the college football playoffs. But they don't. They win, and they win in convincing fashion against Tennessee. You also see a couple of other SEC teams lose over the weekend, like LSU falling to Kansas, which I almost bet, which I'm very glad I didn't bet. But with the SEC now eliminating a lot of these teams that had the what-if situation of getting into the college football playoffs, things shift around a little bit, T-Bone, in terms of the rankings and how you're looking at college football playoff-bound teams.
Yeah, now that you're looking at it, I mean, you go back to what the playoff rankings were last week, and you thought, okay, Georgia's the team that's on the outside looking in, and now they're kind of control their own destiny to get to the college football playoff, you know? They needed that win right there. Their final 2 games versus UMass and versus Georgia Tech. They should win those 2 football games. The funny thing is now the team that's going to be on the outside looking in, I believe, we'll see what the committee does when they release the rankings, but I think it's going to be Tennessee.
Agreed.
I think Tennessee went from being they're the 7 seed. No, they find a way to win this game. They're the team that's safe. And now you look at them and go, holy crap, they need all kinds of help if they're going to get into the playoff, because you're going to have a Big 12 team get in automatically with winning their conference championship. ACC is going to get 1 team automatically. You're going to end up with a group of 5 team that's there. Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State are all safe. Indiana's the one team that you're now looking at if you're Tennessee going, we really need either Indiana to get blown out by Ohio State because they then won't have a good win on their resume, or you need Notre Dame to lose once again. And their 2 games left are Army, and then they've got USC. So, maybe there's a loss there. But I think right now Tennessee's the team that suddenly looks like they're going to be the team that's on the outside looking in, because Alabama, Ole Miss, Georgia are all going to slide up now, and I think Tennessee's going to slide down and fall out of this college football playoff ranking, which is amazing to say, because though they lost that game, it wasn't as bad as the score seems to say, because early on they played really well.
Yeah. Then
Georgia finally adjusted to them and started to stop them.
Yeah, well, and that's the part, what's wild about it now, obviously, Tennessee's still going to be in the conversation. They're going to be hoping for a lot more. You know, Texas A&M is sitting there at 8-2, but I don't think they have a record compared to Tennessee that would put them in that conversation. Because all of these teams have faltered, and I misspoke there. I said LSU lost to Kansas. LSU lost to Florida. Kansas was the one that beat BYU. I was going to get to that in just a minute. But the SEC went from what we talked about at the beginning of the season, like, hey, you could see 5 teams be playoff bound this year. Now we're talking about, 3 with maybe 4 getting in, because you've got Texas, Georgia, and Alabama. And then now we're talking the scenario of, does Tennessee get into the college football playoffs because of that loss? Does Texas A&M put themselves in that conversation because LSU has counted themselves out? South Carolina's already dealing with 3 losses. What was once 5 teams fighting for it might now be 3, maybe 4, because everyone else around them has found ways to be dominant.
Yeah, I think there's 6 teams still alive in the SEC, and I think they're fighting currently for 4 spots. I do think it can open to 5. I think where it'll get interesting is if Indiana gets blown out by Ohio State, and I'm not really sure that that's going to happen, but let's just say it does. Now there's a real conversation about does Indiana belong in the top?
Right, because that's the only
top 11.
Because they don't have a top 25 win.
No,
under the
they don't
belt.
have a top 25 win. And like you look at Indiana's schedule, it is nothing to really write home about. Like their best win, if they don't beat Ohio State, their best win is Nebraska. Like it's tough to find the win. Maybe Washington at home. They just don't have quality wins on their schedule.
Yeah.
Ohio State is the only top 25 team on their schedule that they're going to have a chance to beat. So it comes down to what happens to Indiana if they get blown out. And then it just comes down to does Notre Dame lose again? Because I don't think Notre Dame will get in with 2 losses because they've got the A&M win on the road, which is a nice win to have. Outside of that, though, there's not a whole lot there because if they beat Army, Army's going to fall out. They beat Navy, well, they fell out because of that. And they beat Louisville, but Louisville's lost since then again. So Louisville's fallen out of the top 25. So they don't have another spot you can look at and say, okay, does a 2-loss Notre Dame team belong here? They don't. So I think the SEC has 4 spots that they're really fighting for, and a 5th can open up. And it comes down to Texas, Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss, Tennessee, and A&M. And where it gets interesting is what happens if A&M beats Texas in that second-to-last game. And then you got the conference championship to throw in there as well. And now if I'm a team looking at it and I'm in the race for the SEC championship game, I'm going, we don't really want to be in it because that could be our 3rd loss that could send us out of this playoff picture.
Here's another thing. Alabama, to me, is not an absolute lock yet. And the reason why, I think they'll be fine against Oklahoma. I always concerned about that Auburn game. I am always concerned about that. Last year, they won that game on a last-second touchdown.
Yeah.
Literally, it was basically as time expired, if I remember right. Like, that game is always neck and neck right to the very end. And if Alabama's playoff hopes are riding on beating Auburn, man, I could see Auburn giving them a run in that last game.
Those final couple of weeks are going to be interesting to see who falls out of it. Again, you've already had a couple that have dropped out in the conversation, but BYU losing to Kansas really puts a stale taste in your mouth in terms of where they are because they were considered a playoff team, and now you don't know where they fall into that conversation. And with BYU playing, or with that loss, and then Colorado's got an opportunity to play against Kansas this weekend that basically would be like, hey, we just took down the team that BYU lost to. It feels like you could see a couple of other teams jump up into the conversation of the college football playoff rankings. Speaking of Colorado, did Travis Hunter just win the Heisman Trophy this past weekend, or is it still an open conversation?
I think it's still an open conversation, but I do think Travis Hunter's the one that kind of controls his destiny from here. Look, Ashton Genty was great once again.
Right.
He had an incredible game against San Jose State, and they probably don't win that game if not for him because San Jose State was testing them early on this weekend. I just don't know how you compete with Travis Hunter when the guy's playing on both sides of the football. I mean, this weekend he had an interception to go along with 5 receptions for 55 yards and a rushing touchdown. Like, I don't know how you compete with that. Like, and now that Colorado is actually a good football team, they are, to me, I think they're going to end up in the playoff. Because the Big 12 is going to have one spot. It comes down to their conference champion. And I think Colorado is going to get there, and I think they're going to beat whoever they end up facing. I don't know how you don't vote for Travis Hunter. It's like not voting for Shohei Ohtani to win MVP when he was pitching and hitting 40 home runs.
Right.
Like, I just don't know how you compete with that kind of a unicorn. So, yeah, I think, and I found myself rooting for Genty just because he went to a smaller school, group of 5.
Oh, yeah.
I don't see how he comes back unless something happens to Travis Hunter, which I hope doesn't, because he's great to watch on the football field. I think it's Hunter's Heisman to lose at this point.
We think only one Big 12 team's going to get in, right? There's no scenario where 2 teams get in,
the
right? The
committee basically has said with their rankings, I mean, looking at last week's rankings, BYU's the only team in the top 12. The second team to them was Kansas State at 16, and they lost, and then Colorado at 17. So, yeah, I don't see a scenario where you're seeing multiple Big 12 teams getting in.
So one of those gets in. We say 4 SEC teams get in. Probably 4 Big 10 teams get in.
Yeah.
And then you're looking at, 3 other spots that are open for conversation.
ACC,
yeah, one's ACC, one's independent. And then from there, that probably is either Miami or a Boise State.
Yeah, one of those
2 teams.
One group of 5 and then one from the ACC.
So some really interesting games this weekend. Like I said, you get Colorado, depending on what happens with BYU, puts themselves. You get the playoff rankings later on tonight, so we'll kind of see where things fall in line with that. But for right now, that SEC is wide open. Like Tebow mentioned, you got 6 teams fighting for 4 spots compared to at the beginning of the season where it felt like there was about 8 teams fighting for 5 or maybe 6 spots in the playoff football conversation for college. Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. We'll take our final break. We'll come back. We'll rewind it as we wrap up BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Wrapping things up here on BK and Ferrario as we hit our rewind with Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis. I'm Alex Ferrario. Fun show today. If you miss anything from our conversations from 11 to 2, you can check it out afterwards on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, or wherever you get your podcasts, always presented by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. As we rewind it, we'll touch back on the breaking news from today, if you want to call it breaking news. Elliot Friedman reporting about 30 minutes ago that the Blues are putting Kapanen through waivers. That, of course, will not be official until tomorrow around the 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock hour, as that's when waivers are cleared or if you were claimed. So everybody's got an opportunity to claim Kapanen, and if they don't claim him, he'll go down to the American Hockey League. Speculating with it as we played Joe Vitale's audio from pregame last night saying that there's a chance Robert Thomas could play on this homestand or potentially on that road trip. This pretty much signifies that you could see Robert Thomas back at some point this week, which if you would have told me that when that fractured ankle took place, they said 4 to 6 weeks and then reevaluated, I expected that to be closer to the 6-week mark. And if he returns on Thursday, you're 2 days beyond exactly 4 weeks from that ankle injury, which I don't know what's going to happen for this Blues season. That's big news to get Robert Thomas back that early.
Yeah, and huge news for the St. Louis Blues. And where I think it helps, it's going to help them on every aspect of their game. I think it helps them most defensively. Yeah. I mean, we read off the numbers early on in the show when we were talking about what if he did return and what does that mean. They have the second worst goals allowed in the NHL per game since the Robert Thomas injury. And I think you're really going to see that's where they miss him. And they're going to miss him they missed him on the faceoff dot. They've been terrible on the faceoff dot since he's been injured. Now, what does that lead to for the St. Louis Blues? We were kind of running through the numbers with the remaining part of their schedule. And look, it's still super early. But they got to play at like a, 62% points percentage just to get to like 95 points, which is what it might take to get to the playoffs
and
this
to put
year.
that into perspective, Bannister last year, the team had a 594 points percentage from when he was hired.
And if it's more of 90 points to get in, they'll have to play right around that range as well. So does this team have that in them with Robert Thomas returning? Look, I don't think so. Though he's back and will help them. To me, they're a middling 500 team. You know, I don't know if they generate enough offense, but they can be defensively sound enough to where you look at them and say, hey, they can keep games close. If they keep them close, you just need one bounce to really go your way to potentially come out on top.
It'll be interesting to see how they kind of form things. Again, I don't expect them to play Tuesday against Minnesota, maybe Thursday against San Jose, more likely on that road trip through New York. But he will get obviously you would expect to see him on the morning skate tomorrow, just skating around. Wednesday you get a practice, and then you start to really wonder when Robert Thomas returns. We also talked a little bit about Colton Parayko on the show today. We got into the Mizzou football team. Of course, they're kind of out of the playoff conversation now. And we got into a little Cardinals conversation as well. So you can check all that out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com. Again, brought to you by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. Huge thank you to Graham Francis filling in for BK. He will be back with us tomorrow. The gang will be here from 11 to 2. Fastlane coming your way next from 2 to 6 here on 101 ESPN.